Chapter 112. After I finished looking at it, I threw the photo to Zhang Wenfei. This guy carefully caught the photo with both hands and complained, "Can't you be a bit more careful? You can't afford to pay for the photo if it's broken." The corner of my eye twitched and black lines appeared on my forehead. I decided to ignore him and lay down to sleep. Zhang Wenfei quickly turned off the light and lay down on the bed. However, he didn't sleep. Instead, he continued to look at Yi Pianpian's photo with an infatuated expression, occasionally letting out a creepy chuckle. When I woke up the next morning, I turned around and saw that the guy was still holding Yi Pianpian's photo in his hand. He even had a strange smile on his face as he slept. I laughed in my heart. This guy, with his sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, I thought he was an arrogant young genius. But now, it seems that he's just like that fatty with a jumpy personality. After I got up and washed my face, Zhang Wenfei also woke up. However, after he opened his eyes, he didn't get up immediately. Instead, he foolishly smiled at the photo in his hand. Then, he carefully put the photo into his wallet. Feeling refreshed, he jumped off the bed. Judging from his smooth and swift movements, he must have slept with Yi Pianpian's photo in his arms a lot. After we got up, someone quickly brought breakfast for two. I looked at the simple yet elegant breakfast and felt a bit strange. The Metaphysics Society wasn't lacking in money. I was used to the extravagance of the Shenzhen branch, so I wasn't used to seeing this simple yet elegant breakfast here. I asked Zhang Wenfei, and he wasn't surprised at all. He curled his lips and said, "This is our Metaphysics Society's secret base. The ordinary people who work here have signed confidentiality contracts, so they can't leave for the rest of their lives. Moreover, this place doesn't have any connections with the outside world. The vegetables, pasta, and even the spices and oil that you see are all produced by the people here." It was no wonder. It was already not easy to make these things in a self-sufficient state, so there wasn't much to ask for. After breakfast, someone quickly came to inform us to gather in the manor's hall. They said that there was going to be a ceremony. When we arrived, the hall was already filled with people. It seemed that all the young feng shui masters had come. The hall was also divided into different areas. Our Shenzhen branch's area was arranged in the D area, just like the room numbers. After Zhang Wenfei and I sat down, Su Shuxing, who had arrived earlier, glanced at us and snorted. He then turned around without greeting us. It was strange to have a grudge with this guy, but I didn't mind it and ignored him. After I sat down, I lifted my head and looked around. As I looked forward, I was stunned. My eyes couldn't help but shrink. I pointed at a fatty with a warm face and asked Zhang Wenfei, "Zhang Kunlun, do you know him?" Zhang Wenfei lifted his head and said calmly, "He's Zhang Kunlun. He's Zhang Kunlun. Zhang Kunlun. He of the person. Of his head." "He's Zhang," I said. "Is Zhang and it. Zhangt of that of Zhang." I originally thought that I was the only one here who had reached the realm of drawing qi like a pillar by chance. I didn't expect that there would be another person here. It hasn't been long since I joined the Metaphysics Society, so I haven't heard much about it. Why is this fatty famous? I asked Zhang Wenfei as I stared at the fatty. Zhang Wenfei said calmly, "Of course he's from a good family. Didn't you see which section he was sitting in? Area A. Only the Shaanxi Metaphysics Association and the Hunan Metaphysics Association can sit there." I was even more confused. What was wrong with Zone A? What's so special about these two branches of metaphysics? After asking Zhang Wenfei, I learned that the seating arrangement of the Metaphysics Society was very particular. It was divided into 10 different levels. Since the establishment of the Metaphysics Society, only the Shaanxi Metaphysics Society and the Hunan Metaphysics Society could sit in the A area. Of course, Shaanxi and Hunan were actually Shi and Metaphysics Association and Luoyang Metaphysics Association. These two places were the cornerstones of their respective metaphysics societies. They occupied a large number of seats, and the other societies in the province couldn't compare. These two cities were the origin of Chinese civilization. They had thousands of years of civilization, especially Luoyang. The Book of Changes said, "The river has a map, and the Luo has a book." This meant that during Fushi's time, a dragon horse appeared from the Yellow River, carrying the river map. A divine turtle appeared from the Luo River, carrying the Luo book. Fushi used this map and book to draw the 8 trigrams. Later on, King Wen of Zhou used Fushi's 8 trigrams to create the One King's 8 trigrams and the 64 trigrams. That was the origin of the Book of Changes and Chinese civilization. Moreover, these two places were imperial capitals with thousands of years of history. They were places where the dragon veins of China converged. From ancient times until now, it could be said that there were many treasures and geniuses, especially in the field of feng shui. Some of the big feng shui families could be compared to famous sections. These feng shui families were the cornerstones of the metaphysics society. Among these feng shui families, the Zhang family of Mount Mang and the Han family of Qinling were the most famous. Zhang Kunlun, the fat man I mentioned earlier, was a member of the Zhang family of Mount Mang. Not far from him was a tall man with a thick frame. He was Han Wennan of the Han family of Qinling. I followed Zhang Wenfei's finger and saw another man whose realm of Tao energy wasn't weaker than mine. Realms were a taboo topic, so I didn't continue to ask Zhang Wenfei about it. However, I guessed that these two families had some methods that outsiders didn't know about. It wasn't strange that they could train 2 disciples who had reached the Qi-gathering realm without going through the metaphysics society. After all, the dragon vein wasn't limited to the true dragon vein. For example, the Mount Tai stone in the Shenzhen Society could support a person to reach the Qi channeling realm after the true dragon vein was used up. After talking about the 2 metaphysics societies in Area A, Zhang Wenfei introduced the other societies in Area B and Area C. They were Beijing, Jiangsu, Shandong, and Jiangxi. These places were basically places where ancient civilizations gathered. Jiangxi and Shandong were the territories of the 2 big families of the southern Zhang and northern Kong. Although these 2 big families didn't have anything to do with the Metaphysics Society, with these 2 families teaching in these 2 places, it was reasonable that the Metaphysics Society was stronger than other places. Next up is our Guangdong branch, as well as the Shanghai branch, which is also in District D, followed by the Sichuan branch, Tianjin branch, and so on. Among them, other than the Chengdu branch, the other branches were all in the more developed areas in the modern era. Although their ancient legacies might not be as good as the branches above them, they had been catching up in recent years and were getting closer. The Sichuan branch was the most special. The ancient heritage here was not inferior to the other branches, but the strange thing was that this place was not covered by the civilization of the Central Plains. In ancient times, this place had its own unique civilization. Even now, although it had long merged with other places, in terms of the metaphysics world, this place was still incompatible with other places. Moreover, there was something hidden in the dark that shocked the entire metaphysics world. Of course, Zhang Wenfei himself did not know the specifics. He said that these secret histories were all told to him by Old Master Zhao. Although the Old Master was only an ordinary feng shui master, his attainments in feng shui were extremely profound, especially the preservation of ancient civilizations by the Hakka people. Old Master Zhao had a very deep understanding of ancient civilizations. Usually, he taught Zhang Wenfei a lot of things. Unfortunately, his virtuous and respectable master had taught a silly disciple who didn't even have a filter on his mouth. He didn't even wait for me to ask before he told me everything. After listening to Zhang Wenfei's story, I was shocked. It was just like what was recorded in the death scripture. Metaphysics wasn't just about metaphysics. It was something that came with the entire civilization and was closely related to the development of the Chinese civilization. Chapter 113. While I was chatting with Zhang Wenfei, a tall and skinny young man in the front row suddenly walked in front of Han Wennan from the Qinling Han group and said with an arrogant expression, "Han Wennan, it's time for us to settle the matter between us. During the Young Phoenix gathering, the one who opens the least meridians will withdraw. What do you think?" I couldn't help but look at them. These two were just like Su Shuxing and Zhang Wenfei. It was obvious that they had a grudge against each other and were using the Young Phoenix gathering as a wager. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei squeezed out 2 words with an unfriendly face. "Dog biting dog." I turned to look at him suspiciously. It was normal for this guy to have a grudge against someone like Su Shuxing. After all, they were from the Guangdong branch. However, they were worlds apart. Why did he have a grudge against Han Wennan, a member of the Qinling Han family? Before I could open my mouth to ask, Han Wennan spoke first. He coldly glanced at the tall and thin young man without any expression on his face. It was as if he was looking at an idiot. His mouth moved slightly before he spat out one word, "Scram." I was stunned. This guy looked honest and slow. I didn't expect him to be so arrogant. The tall and slender young man had walked over from the seats of the Beijing branch in Zone B. It was obvious that he wasn't an ordinary person, but Han Wennan didn't give him any face. The tall and slender young man went crazy. His face was ashen. He pointed at Han Wennan and shouted angrily, "Han Wennan, don't be too arrogant. After the Young Phoenix gathering, let's see if you still have the right to be arrogant. I'm telling you, Yi Pianpian belongs to me, Lu Zhenyang. You should give up on her." After that, he angrily returned to his seat. I finally understood. No wonder Zhang Wenfei had called them dog biting dog. He was jealous of Yi Pianpian. After Lu Zhenyang left, Han Wennan, who had been silent all this while, turned his head to look at Zhang Kunlun, who was not far from him. Although he did not say anything, anyone could tell what Han Wennan meant. In his eyes, only Zhang Kunlun was his opponent. The hall quieted down. The other members of the Metaphysics Association stared at Han Wennan. Zhang Wenfei forced a smile and said to me, "Brother Zhou, last night you asked me to pursue Yi Pianpian. It's not that I didn't want to do it, but look at who my competitors are." Han Wennan claimed that Yi Pianpian was hers 3 years ago. Although Yi Pianpian beat him up, he was from the Qinling Han family. Since he said that, he couldn't be joking. Now, the members of the Metaphysics Association think that they're a couple. There's also Lu Zhenyang, a member of the Lu family in the capital. Although the Lu family isn't favored by the other feng shui families, the Lu family in the capital is the #1 feng shui family. But even so, Lu Zhenyang only dared to use the Young Phoenix gathering as a bet to snatch a chance from Han Wennan. Why should I have those unrealistic fantasies? Up until now, Zhang Wenfei had always been either arrogant or heartless when he faced others. This was the first time I had seen his face filled with bitterness and helplessness, as well as depression. His words also made me feel sad. So what if the Guangdong branch won 2 championships? This world is too big. Those true geniuses have probably never even glanced at us. Just like now, Zhang Wenfei and I were sitting behind them, talking about them, but they didn't even look back. They didn't even know our names. After a moment of silence, a white-haired, black-robed old man suddenly walked into the hall. Then, the entire hall quieted down, and everyone obediently sat in their seat. At first, I didn't know who he was. After he smiled and introduced himself, I knew that he was the current president of the Metaphysics Union, Gu Lilai. President Gu didn't have an oppressive aura, but he had an indescribable dignity. That was why when he entered the hall, many people quieted down, even though they didn't know him. Yang Shilong and Yi Pianpian were the vice presidents. They had reached the peak of geomasters. What about President Gu? Was he a celestial master? I looked at him and tried my best to see something different about him. However, I couldn't get what I wanted. Then, President Gu briefly announced the procedure. The True Dragon Vein would open tomorrow. At that time, different metaphysics branches would enter in a certain order. To determine the order, there would be a ranking competition. That was what was going to happen today. The true dragon vein would only open once every 3 years. After 3 years of accumulation, the dragon energy in the true dragon vein would be extremely dense. The first batch to enter would definitely have a huge advantage. As more and more feng shui masters entered, the dragon energy would gradually become fainter. Although it wouldn't become fainter by too much, it was a crucial period for feng shui masters. The slightest difference could result in a completely different outcome. No one was willing to take that risk. That was why there was this ranking competition. It was to let the top feng shui masters from each branch stand together and compete with their strength to determine the final order. Zhang Wenfei had already told me about this yesterday. However, I didn't pay much attention to it. On one hand, I didn't really care about the order of entry. It didn't matter if I was the last to enter. On the other hand, it was because this ranking competition was actually meaningless. The first few places would definitely be taken by the branches in Area A and B, while the last few places would be much weaker. There was no chance for them to advance. That was why the ranking competition was hastily decided based on the order of the Metaphysics Society. In the previous 9 ranking competitions, there had only been 5 fights, barely more than half of them. Moreover, most of them were in the first few competitions. In the last 3 competitions, everyone had given up on 2 of them. However, according to Zhang Wenfei's prediction, there would be a fight this time. It had nothing to do with who was the last. It was only related to Han Wennan, Zhang Kunlun, Lu Zhenyang and the others. They were all prodigies of their generation. They would definitely fight for the first place. Although I didn't pay much attention to it before, I suddenly had an idea. In terms of strength, everyone was still in the dragon luring realm. I was at the peak of the dragon luring realm. I didn't believe that I would be weaker than anyone. Han Wennan and the others had never looked back. But what if I defeated them and led the Guangdong branch to be the first to enter the true dragon vein? Would they be standing behind me and looking up at my back at that moment? As I thought about it, my heart beat violently and I made my decision. Soon, President Gu gave a simple explanation and left the rostrum. He was replaced by another middle-aged feng shui master, who walked up to the rostrum with a smile and said, "The ranking competition can start now. Those who are willing to fight for a high position, please come to the rostrum together later. Also, those who don't wish to participate, I will explain the rules. Each branch will now have a ranking based on their seat. For those who are not participating, their seats will be the current temporary ranking. Those who are willing to participate can challenge the branch in front of them. As long as they win, they will take over the loser's position, and the other branch's positions will be pushed back. Does everyone understand?" Everyone nodded to show that they understood the rules. Afterwards, it was time for those who were willing to participate to go up the platform. I hesitated for a moment before clenching my teeth and preparing to stand up. However, at that moment, Zhang Wenfei, who was sitting next to me, pulled me back. "Zhou Yi, I know that you don't care about this ranking, so I want to fight in your place. What do you think?" I was stunned. It was possible to let someone else fight in the champion's place. After all, most of the time, the strongest person wouldn't necessarily be the champion of the dragon seizing competition. In order to obtain a good ranking in the ranking competition, it was necessary to send out the strongest person. Thus, although the ranking competition was nominally for the champion, it was actually for the strongest person of each branch. Before I could reply, Zhang Wenfei said, "Han Wennan and the others will definitely have to compete in this competition. I know my talent. If I miss today, I'm afraid that I won't even have the chance to stand on the same stage as them. This is my last chance. I know that I definitely won't be able to compete with Yi Piampian, but no matter what, I still want to compete with them. Otherwise, I won't be satisfied." Chapter 114. Many people had unrealistic fantasies, but some people's fantasies were just fantasies, while others' fantasies were just fantasies. The only difference between them was how much you were willing to pay for your fantasies. Zhang Wenfei had asked me for the opportunity to fight this time. In fact, it was selfish of him to ignore the overall situation, but I had to say that he was willing to pay everything for his fantasies. This was unfair to others, but it would allow him to not have any regret. I turned to ask him, "If I don't agree, will you choose to challenge me?" Zhang Wenfei was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, "Of course. Alright, if he wanted to fight, then let him. As for Han Wennan, Zhang Kunlun, and the others, I would compete with them at the Young Phoenix gathering. It's true that they are favored by the heavens, but I was able to become a monk halfway and reach the peak of the dragon-seeking realm like them. I'm not arrogant, but I definitely don't think that I'm any worse than them." I said to Zhang Wenfei, "You just have to deal with the others. I'll withdraw." Zhang Wenfei grinned and nodded. "I'll remember this favor." With that, he turned to the other 8 people with us and said, "Zhou Yi has decided to withdraw from the competition for the champion position. I want to fight in his place. If any of you have any objections, you can fight with me first." As soon as he said that, Su Shuxing, who had been ready to make a move, immediately stood up. But at this moment, Zhang Wenfei took out a thick brush and placed it on the table. In an instant, our gazes were attracted to it. Upon closer inspection, the brush was glowing and exuded a strong Dao aura. Su Shuxing cried out, "Magic tool! This is Zhang Kanwen's Yamaluo brush. Why is it in your hands?" I had heard Zhang Wenfei mention that Zhang Kanwen was the name of his eldest senior brother, who was a director of the Metaphysics Association. He was very famous in the entire Guangdong metaphysics world. Zhang Wenfei smiled faintly. "When I was 8, eldest senior brother gave this magic tool to me. Since then, I have been nourishing it. It has been 18 years since then, and I have never used this magic tool. Today is the first time I have taken it out. If any of you want to be my test subject, feel free to do so." His voice was very calm, but within that calmness, there was an absolute confidence. After he finished speaking, the others were expressionless. Only Su Shuxing's eyelids twitched violently, but he still sat back in his chair. "Since there are no objections, then our branch will have Brother Zhang fight in the ranking competition," I said from the side, then turned to Zhang Wenfei and said, "Take care." Zhang Wenfei nodded with a grin and stepped onto the rostrum. At this time, the other chiefs who were willing to fight were already standing on the stage. Other than the top 3 branch chiefs and Zhang Wenfei, there were only 4 others. The smiling director, Song Xing, opened his mouth to confirm that no one else was willing to fight. Then, he announced the start of the ranking competition with a smile. The first person to step forward was the honest-looking Han Wennan. He only said one sentence: "The Shangxi branch is ranked first. If you have any objections, feel free to look for me." It was a simple sentence with a bit of a Shangxi accent, but it revealed a domineering air of supremacy, causing everyone's momentum to stagnate. However, there were still some people who weren't scared. For example, Lu Zhenyang. He seemed to have been waiting for this opportunity and was about to step forward. But before he could step forward, Zhang Wenfei spoke first. "The Guangdong Metaphysics Association wants to fight with you." As soon as his words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. Originally, everyone was watching the people in Area A and Area B fight for the first place, and they didn't even consider the others. Even the few people standing on the rostrum, in everyone's eyes, were only fighting for the lower ranks. Who would have thought that Zhang Wenfei would come out of nowhere and fight for the first place? Before Han Wennan could speak, Lu Zhenyang stood up first and said to Zhang Wenfei with a face full of disbelief, "Did your mouth say something wrong, or did your brain turn in the wrong circles? Stay on the side and don't meddle in things that you shouldn't meddle in." Zhang Wenfei said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I was the one who challenged first. There has to be a first come, first served rule. Lu Zhenyang curled his lips. Forget it. Our Beijing branch's ranking is high. Even if it's first come, first served, it won't be your turn. The two continued to argue. At this time, Han Wennan became impatient and said with a frown, "You two fight first. The winner can come find me." Lu Zhenyang clearly supported this idea. He impatiently waved his hand. "That's fine. Hurry up and come." Only Zhang Wenfei's face darkened. I knew that the reason why he insisted on fighting was because he wanted to fight with Han Wennan. Regardless of the outcome, he would be risking his life for himself. But who knew that he would be stopped by Lu Zhenyang halfway? Only the two of us knew what he was thinking. Thus, this seemingly reasonable suggestion immediately gained the approval of director Song Xing, who was in charge of the ranking competition. He asked the others to step down and left the rostrum to Lu Zhenyang and Zhang Wenfei. Very quickly, Zhang Wenfei adjusted his thoughts. The gloomy expression on his face disappeared and was replaced with a solemn and persistent expression. He once again took out the thick Yama's brush. At this time, Lu Zhenyang seemed to have heard about the Guangdong branch's news. He asked with interest, "You're the Guangdong branch's chief? I heard that you're the same as me. In this year's dragon seizing competition, you've also obtained 2 chief positions?" I was stunned. I hadn't heard of this before. This guy had actually obtained 2 chief positions like me. Zhang Wenfei was also stunned, but he immediately shook his head and said, "You're talking about Zhou Yi. He gave up the opportunity to fight this time. I'll fight in his place." "Tsk." Lu Zhenyang let out a disdainful sound. He sounded a little impatient. "I originally thought that you'd obtained 2 chief positions like me and wanted to let you go. Forget it then. Hurry up and make your move." Lu Zhenyang's words and actions were very casual, but Zhang Wenfei was extremely serious. He didn't say anything else. He just picked up the Yama's brush in his hand and infused it with Dao Qi. In an instant, a dense cold qi emerged from the brush, while the tip of the brush below emitted bursts of explosive yang qi. Under the intertwining of yin and yang, it really looked like the yin-yang brush in the hands of the king of hell. Yin qi and yang qi emerged from the same brush, but strangely, they didn't neutralize each other. Instead, they collided with each other and emitted bursts of explosive sounds. It looked very powerful. Zhang Wenfei didn't hold back at all. As soon as he drew out the Dao Qi, he reached out and waved his hand. The yin and yang qi on the tip of the brush and the brush rushed in Lu Zhenyang's direction at the same time. At the same time, Lu Zhenyang also took out something that looked like a seal from his body. Without making any movements, he casually threw it into the air. This huge seal did not look like much when it was thrown into the air, but when it fell, it looked the same as before. However, its aura skyrocketed. It felt like a small mountain was crushing down from the sky. It was surrounded by Qi of the Wei, and it carried an incomparable might. I sighed silently in my heart. Zhang Wenfei's Yama's brush was very strange. After the yin and yang Qi collided, the power that was released was far more violent than his own Dao Qi. It could even be said to have exceeded his own strength. However, the Dao Qi in his body was too different from Lu Zhenyang's. Although Lu Zhenyang hadn't completely reached the level of Qi drawing like Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun, he wasn't far from it. As for Zhang Wenfei, the Dao Qi in his body was at best slightly stronger than Qi drawing like a finger. There was no way to compare the two. The amount of Dao Qi became the decisive force. After Lu Zhenyang's huge seal fell, it directly scattered the Dao Qi on the Yama's brush. Then, with its remaining power, it smashed towards Zhang Wenfei's body. Zhang Wenfei's expression changed, and he hurriedly took out another talisman. However, with his current realm, if it weren't for the fact that he had nurtured the Yama's brush since he was young, it would be difficult for him to control it. Moreover, he wanted to divert his attention to use another talisman? He didn't even have the chance to activate the talisman. The huge seal directly smashed into his chest. His whole body flew backward and fell to the ground. He spat out a large mouthful of blood and directly fainted. Lu Zhenyang actually didn't hold back at all when he was sure that he would win. A feng shui master who hadn't been baptized by dragon qi was not much stronger than an ordinary person. How could his body withstand the surging Dao qi? Chapter 115. Zhang Wenfei laid on the ground. His face was pale and his breathing was weak. He had already fainted. I picked up his arm and felt for his pulse. I couldn't feel it beating anymore. I anxiously sent my Dao energy to him. At this moment, Director Song Xing, who was presiding over the ranking competition, came over and pulled me back. He said, "The Metaphysics Society has arranged for someone to treat the injured feng shui master. Little friend, you don't need to worry." Following his words, a middle-aged feng shui master came over with two young men. He placed a talisman on Zhang Wenfei's body and instructed the two young men to carry Zhang Wenfei away. I heaved a sigh of relief. I felt sad as I watched Zhang Wenfei being carried away. Just as he had said, this might be his only chance to fight against these prideful geniuses. After the Young Phoenix gathering, these prideful geniuses were destined to be renowned throughout the world. At that time, others could only look up at their backs and watch helplessly as they were left behind by them until they couldn't even see their backs anymore. Unfortunately, even though this was his only chance, Zhang Wenfei only gained humiliation. I sighed and turned to look at Lu Zhenyang, who was still standing to the side. Although the ranking competition was important, it was still an internal competition within the Metaphysics Society. Moreover, the outcome was already decided at the last moment, so he could have held back. However, he didn't. I looked at Lu Zhenyang and coldly said, "The outcome was already decided, but Taoist Lu didn't hold back. Isn't that a bit too much?" Lu Zhenyang sneered and asked, "Who are you? Since you southern barbarians want to challenge me, you have to bear the consequences if you lose. Don't you understand this logic?" I coldly smiled. Lu Zhenyang was right. If you lose, you have to bear the consequences. The winner is never wrong. However, this was the law of the jungle. The reason why humans were called humans was because they were different from animals. They had to have compassion and respect. Lu Zhenyang clearly wasn't a compassionate person. I really wanted to know if he was a person with respect. Thus, I shook my head and said, "You're wrong. I'm a northerner. I just joined the Shenzhen Metaphysics Society. But you're right about another thing. If you lose, you have to bear the consequences. But I want to tell you that if you injure someone, you have to bear the consequences too." What? Lu Zhenyang was stunned for a moment before he laughed in disdain. What consequences? Who can make me bear the consequences? You? I didn't reply to him, but turned to face Director Song Xing, who was standing at the side, and cupped my hands in greeting. "Director Song, the Guangdong branch has already been defeated. We will no longer compete for the ranking in the qualifying competition. However, I would like to challenge Taoist Lu of the Beijing branch with my own identity. Would you allow me to?" Director Song Xing was silent for a moment, then he shook his head seriously and said, "The ranking competition is not a child's play, and it is not a place for you to seek revenge. Private fights are absolutely not allowed." Not allowed? I was stunned. Before I could say anything, Lu Zhenyang opened his mouth. His tone was still filled with disdain. "I didn't expect you to be so quick-witted. You clearly know that private fights aren't allowed in the ranking competition. That's why you said that to regain your face, right?" I glanced at him but didn't say anything. Since the Metaphysics Association didn't allow private fights, I could only find another chance to take revenge for Zhang Wenfei. However, just as I was about to walk down the platform, Lu Zhenyang said, "Don't go. It's true that private fights aren't allowed in the ranking competition, but the Metaphysics Association does allow members to fight in the life and death arena. Didn't you want me to bear the consequences? How about it? Do you dare to fight in the life and death arena? I was stunned. Life and death arena? I seemed to have heard Zhang Wenfei mention this before. However, I didn't pay much attention to it and didn't remember it afterwards. That's why I didn't recall it. Seeing that I didn't reply, Lu Zhenyang smiled in disdain. What? You don't dare? It seems that I didn't accuse you wrongly. You southern barbarians only know how to do evil things. When it comes to a life and death arena, you'll be the first to cower. I didn't reply to him. Instead, I turned to Director Song Xing and said, Director Song, I haven't joined the Metaphysics Association for a long time, so there are some rules that I don't understand. May I know how to fight in the life and death arena? Song Xing glanced at me before lifting his head to look at Lu Zhenyang. The members of the Metaphysics Association aren't allowed to have private fight. If there's an irreconcilable grudge, you can request a life and death arena. If both parties agree, the Metaphysics Association won't stop you. Instead, it will provide an arena for both parties and be the judge. I asked again, if both parties agree, can we proceed with the life and death arena now? Song Xing nodded. The date of the life and death arena will be decided by both parties. Generally speaking, if the Metaphysics Association requests a life and death arena, it can be carried out at the same time as the competition. The Metaphysics Association won't interfere. Zhou Yi of the Guangdong Metaphysics Association requests a life and death duel with Lu Zhenyang of the Beijing branch. After he finished speaking, I immediately requested. Without waiting for Song Xing to reply, Lu Zhenyang smiled coldly at me and said loudly, Lu Zhenyang of the Beijing branch agrees to the life and death duel. After he said that, the group of young feng shui masters in the audience instantly started to cheer loudly. Director Song Xing raised his hand to stop the crowd from cheering. Then, he said to the two of us, Go back to your seats in your respective branches and wait for a while. In a moment, bring the life and death duel documents over. You can proceed after the two of you sign them. After saying that, he turned around and left. It seemed that he was going to get the documents he mentioned. I got up and left the platform. However, I didn't return to the Guangdong branch. Instead, I went to Zhang Wenfei's place to check on his injuries. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei had already woken up under the Metaphysics Association's treatment. When he saw me, he smiled bitterly and asked me weakly. I went up to vent my anger. Even if I get beaten to death, I only have myself to blame. Why did you stand up for me? I shook my head and said, It's not just for you, it's also for myself. You should take care of your injuries first. Don't delay this trip. Zhang Wenfei's face was full of self-blame. After a moment of silence, he said, But how could you be so muddle-headed? In the life and death duel, life and death don't matter. Lu Zhenyang isn't a good person. He definitely won't hold back. As he said that, Zhang Wenfei became emotional and struggled to sit up. I quickly went forward to hold him down, but he grabbed my hand and said hurriedly, Zhou Yi, listen to me. Your life is your own. No matter what, it's not as important as your family's life. Listen to me. When Director Song comes back, don't sign it and apply to cancel this duel. I kept silent for a while, then smiled at him. Brother Zhang, I've always been a low-key person. Just like in the Dragon Seizing Tournament, I'm sure you didn't hear my name before, but in the end, didn't I become the champion? So, you have to have confidence in me. Zhang Wenfei was stunned. He lay down on the simple bed made of several chairs. After a moment of silence, he suddenly took out the yin-yang yama pen that he had used before. After looking up at it, he reached out and handed it to me. Since you've said so, I believe you. I don't know if you have a magic tool or not, but this yin-yang yama pen was passed down from my master. My eldest senior brother used it before, and I've been keeping it ever since. Its power is extraordinary. My ability isn't good enough, so I can't display the true power of this pen. Take it. If you can use it, you'll have a higher chance of winning. Since it was the magic tool of Zhang Wenfei's master, I was going to refuse it, but he insisted on giving it to me. He also said that he would let me use his magic tool to win, which would help him fulfill half of his wish. I thought about it. After the incident with the old Guhag, my magic tool compass had disappeared. Now, except for the first place seal that I had obtained after winning the dragon seizing competition, I didn't have any usable magic tools. What's more, since Zhang Wenfei had said so, I didn't refuse and reached out to take the Yin Yang Yama pen. As soon as I held the pen, I could feel the Yin and Yang energy flowing on it. I was shocked. This pen didn't even need to be injected with Tao energy, but it could trigger the Yin and Yang energy on its own. It was really magical. Moreover, the circulation of Yin and Yang was the original meaning of primal chaos taiji. This pen was worthy of being an item passed down from Zhang Wenfei's master. It was really extraordinary. Chapter 116. After returning to the VIP platform, Director Song Xing held 2 documents in his hands. He gave one to me and one to Lu Zhenyang. He told us to sign it if we didn't have any meaning after reading it. After saying that, he purposely glanced at me and added, "Before we sign the contract, the duel to the death won't start, and we can even suggest to stop the duel." Hearing what he said, Lu Zhenyang immediately looked at me with a provocative expression. However, I didn't have the chance to speak to him. I directly shook my head at Director Song Xing and said, "I appreciate Director Song's good intentions, but I've already made up my mind about this duel. Director Song, you don't need to persuade me anymore." Song Xing's expression didn't change. He just handed us 2 pens. I lowered my head and simply flipped through the document in my hand. There were only some detailed disclaimers written on it. In fact, this kind of life waiver document had no legal effect. At the very least, it did not conform to the general law. However, since the Metaphysics Society had specially provided such a document, it definitely had legal effects. It should be due to the uniqueness of the Metaphysics Society that the country had a special law for them. After skimming through it once, I signed my name without hesitation. On the other side, Lu Zhenyang didn't even look at it and had already signed his name. Director Song Xing had us exchange our documents and sign our names again. Then, he took the documents away and told us that we were not allowed to use the seals that we had obtained from the dragon seizing tournament. Then, he stood up and left, leaving the main platform to us. The group of young feng shui masters below the stage was completely excited at this time and kept heckling. However, from the looks of it, almost all of them supported Lu Zhenyang. Even in the Guangdong branch, no one supported me. The 8 of them sat there in silence. Su Shuxing even sneered at me. I wasn't angry at their behavior. After all, I wasn't familiar with them, so I couldn't force them to unite with me. I held the Yin Yang Yama brush in my hand and didn't rush to make a move. Lu Zhenyang, who was standing in front of me, also didn't seem to be in a hurry. Instead, he said to me with interest, "I just asked. So you're Zhou Yi, one of the 2 champions of the dragon seizing tournament. This year, there's only you and me. I'm very curious. How did you see through the feng shui of the netherworld that was transformed from a turtle and a snake?" I was stunned. Turtle-snake transformation? Could it be that in the dragon seizing tournament, every branch had the same topic? In the past, I really didn't know about this, but looking at Lu Zhenyang's expression, it should be the case. This was quite fair. It's nothing more than ordinary accumulation and a lucky stroke of luck. Looking at the Xiang's grave is the same as cultivating as a geomaster. Aside from these 2 methods, there is no other way. I brushed him off coldly and didn't want to talk too much with him. I secretly mobilized the Taoist energy in my body to prepare for the upcoming fierce battle. Lu Zhenyang clapped his hands towards me and said with a smile, "What you said is correct. Our Lu family is one of the best in the world. Among the younger generation, I have never met a worthy opponent. I didn't think that you would suddenly appear this year." His tone was not small. He had underestimated the heroes of the world. I looked at Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun. Both of them were sitting there with a calm expression. They didn't react to Lu Zhenyang's words. Only then did I understand that Lu Zhenyang wasn't speaking nonsense. Their Lu family should have a unique understanding of feng shui. It was only later that I found out that the Lu family was a new feng shui family. The reason why they took root in the capital was because of Lu Zhenyang's grandfather. He had fought alongside the leader of the republic. Even the construction of the capital was directed by his grandfather. To put it bluntly, the Lu family's grandfather's identity could be considered as the country's teacher. At this moment, I didn't know any of this, so I didn't fear Lu Zhenyang. I only mobilized my Taoist energy while listening to him speak. Lu Zhenyang's face seemed to have some pity as he said, "It's just that I didn't think that you would be so arrogant. I originally wanted to take your life, but I admire your feng shui skills. Fine, I'll let you live." When he said this, he still had that arrogant look on his face, as if he was giving out his benevolence. Looking at him, I suddenly felt that Zhang Wenfei knew that he wasn't strong enough, but he still wanted to challenge Han Wennan and the others. It wasn't just because of Yi Pianpian, but also because of Han Wennan and Lu Zhenyang's arrogant look. I didn't know what others would think of him, but from what I saw, he was really annoying. I looked at him and kept silent for a while. Then, I said to him seriously, "Since you have this kind of thought, it proves that you aren't as evil as I thought you were. I've also decided to let you live." Lu Zhenyang was stunned at first, then his face turned red. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "You don't know how to appreciate my kindness." After saying that, he flipped his right hand and took out the seal-shaped magic tool that I had seen before. "Since you don't know life from death, I'll let you personally experience the ending of someone who doesn't know life from death." Following his words, the enormous yellow and white seal suddenly surged with Tao energy. Then, it was tossed into the air and flew towards me with great power. Just like before, when the seal was tossed into the air, I didn't feel anything. However, when it reached the highest point and started to descend, its aura was completely different. The yellow and white light on it instantly became extremely dazzling. Although it didn't seem to grow in size, it felt as if the seal had become a small mountain. It carried an extremely terrifying power as it pressed down on my head. That's right, the seal pressed down and not smashed down. Its speed wasn't fast, but it seemed to be slow. However, when it was far away from me, I felt an unstoppable power. I suddenly thought of Zhao Yongquan's paperweight magic tool that I had seen before. Back then, when that paperweight was suppressing the powerful black zombie, I also felt an unstoppable power from the paperweight. This seal was probably a suppressing magic tool. It was extremely rare. When I watched Zhang Wenfei fight with him, I only felt that the Tao energy contained in it wasn't too strong, so I didn't take it to heart. It wasn't until I personally experienced it that I understood what it felt like. Fortunately, I had accepted Zhang Wenfei's yin-yang yama brush. Otherwise, without the magic tool in hand and the chief's seal, it would have been difficult for me to deal with him. My expression didn't change. I just poured the Tao energy that I had been gathering for a long time into the yin-yang yama brush. Almost instantly, yin and yang energy gushed out from the brush's shaft and tip. It even formed a small whirlwind around me. When Lu Zhenyang's yellow and white seal was in front of me, the yin and yang energy on the yin-yang yama brush formed two yin and yang fishes visible to the naked eye. Then, I waved the yama brush in the air, and the yin and yang fishes appeared above my head. At that moment, Lu Zhenyang's seal magic tool directly smashed into the yin and yang fishes with an incomparably powerful aura. Then, in the next second, that powerful aura directly disappeared into the yin and yang fishes. Even the seal fell into the yin and yang fishes, not moving for a long time. The Tao energy in Lu Zhenyang's body couldn't compare to mine, so I wasn't surprised by this result. However, I didn't expect that Zhang Wenfei's inherited magic tool would be so miraculous. It seemed to be able to effortlessly defeat Lu Zhenyang's magic tool. In an instant, Lu Zhenyang's expression changed. His hands continuously guided the Tao energy, trying to call back his magic tool. However, after struggling for a while, the huge yellow and white seal couldn't break free from the yin and yang fishes. I reached out and grabbed the yellow and white seal. I didn't even have time to check it and directly put it away. Zhang Wenfei had previously told me about the rules of a life and death duel. Life and death were up to fate, not to mention these worldly possessions. If the things on the participants' bodies were taken away, they had to accept the loss and return them to the other party. After taking the seal, I coldly smiled and waved the Yama brush in my hand again. The yin and yang fishes above my head suddenly disappeared, turning into two strands of yin and yang energy that surged towards Lu Zhenyang. Chapter 117. Without the magic tools, Lu Zhenyang didn't have the strength to fight against me. He could only take out 2 talismans. Although he had activated them, they didn't even last for half a second under the power of the yin and yang Yama brush's yin and yang energy. They were directly dispersed. Immediately after, the 2 yin-yang qi turned into a yin-yang fish, imprinting on Lu Zhenyang's chest. Just like Zhang Wenfei, Lu Zhenyang didn't have the strength to resist and was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. I thought that Lu Zhenyang would understand this after going through such a difficult situation. According to the rules of the life and death duel, I had the right to kill Lu Zhenyang. However, as I thought before, humans aren't beasts. Only those with compassion and respect can be called humans. As long as he paid the price for his actions, it was fine. I didn't have the intention to kill him. Following Lu Zhenyang's defeat, the entire hall quieted down. After a long time, someone applauded and cheered again. The audience was the same as before. No matter who was right or wrong, they would only applaud the winner. At this time, the feng shui master that had treated Zhang Wenfei came in with 2 people to treat Lu Zhenyang's injuries. Director Song Xing also walked over with a solemn face. After checking Lu Zhenyang's injuries, he walked back to me. Lu Zhenyang has lost his ability to fight. You are the winner of this life and death duel. After saying that, he took out the 2 documents and had me sign them in different places. Then, he said, the life and death duel is over. You can return to your seat in the branch. I glanced at the Guangdong branch. What was different from before was that besides Su Shuxing, the others all stood up and cheered for me. I curled my lips but didn't lift my leg. Instead, I turned to Director Song Xing and said, Director Song, is there a limit to the number of life and death duels? As soon as I said that, Director Song's calm expression finally disappeared. He looked at me in shock. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. The crowd below the stage instantly quietened down. Then, they exclaimed in unison. Everyone had a look of disbelief on their faces. After the exclamations from below the stage subsided, Director Song Xing finally calmed down. His face returned to normal, but there was a hint of gloominess in it. He asked me with dissatisfaction, there is no limit to the number of life and death duels. What do you mean? I nodded and said calmly, since there are no restrictions, I would like to challenge Han Wen'an. Hearing me say this name, the audience that had just calmed down started shouting again. This time, it was even louder, and it didn't seem like it would stop for a long time. In the end, it took Director Song Xing a long time to calm the crowd down. Then he raised his voice and said to Han Wen'an of the Shangxi branch, Zhou Yi of the Guangdong branch has issued you a life and death duel. Do you agree? When he asked, I turned to look too. Han Wen'an's face was honest and stiff. He didn't have any expression on his face. After staring at me for a while, he nodded and said in a muffled voice, I agree. Director Song Xing didn't say anything else. He directly asked me to go and prepare, while he went to prepare the documents for the life and death duel. After I went down, Zhang Wenfei looked at me in disbelief. Even several people from the Guangdong branch, who were sitting in the distance, rushed over and asked me what was wrong with me. Why did I want to challenge Han Wennan? In fact, I didn't know why I had the urge to challenge him just now. Was it because of Zhang Wenfei's fantasy? Or was it just because I wasn't willing? Thinking about it carefully, before Zhang Wenfei said that he wanted to challenge Han Wennan, I had already planned to compete with him in the championship competition. It was only because of Zhang Wenfei's request that I gave up on the idea. But now I had easily defeated Lu Zhenyang. Moreover, the magic tool that Zhang Wenfei wanted me to use was unexpectedly powerful. I naturally didn't want to let go of such an excellent opportunity. What's more, just like what Zhang Wenfei had said before, I would use his magic tool to help him defeat these people. It could be considered as fulfilling his dream. Since it was to fulfill his dream, defeating Lu Zhenyang wasn't a big deal. His dream was to defeat Han Wennan. After thinking it through, I smiled at Zhang Wenfei and said, "I'm not crazy. Just now, you told me to use your magic tool to help you fulfill your dream. Since it's like this, why don't I challenge Han Wennan?" At this time, Zhang Wenfei's complexion had recovered a bit. He choked on my words and said anxiously, "But it's Han Wennan. You defeated Lu Zhenyang and helped me take revenge. You also helped me fulfill my dream." I shook my head. The one who claimed that Yi Pianpian was his woman was Han Wennan, not Lu Zhenyang. What's more, you didn't believe me before. Now that I have defeated Lu Zhenyang, do you still not believe in my strength? Zhang Wenfei was speechless. He opened his mouth and said after a long time, "But it's Han Wennan. Han Wennan of the Qinling Han family. Besides Zhang Kunlun, no one in the younger generation can be compared to him. Although you defeated Lu Zhenyang, Han Wennan isn't Lu Zhenyang. Moreover, this is a life and death duel. In the end, it won't be as simple as losing." Hearing him say this, the corners of my mouth curled into a smile. The Tao energy in Han Wennan's body was only at the same level as mine. It was very possible that I couldn't defeat him, but I didn't believe that I would be seriously injured or killed by him. I smiled at Zhang Wenfei and said, "He can't kill me. I have this confidence." Hearing me say this, Zhang Wenfei stopped trying to persuade me. I also sat cross-legged next to him and used this last opportunity to adjust the Tao energy in my body. The yin-yang yama brush was very powerful, but to trigger such a strong yin and yang energy, it naturally consumed a lot of Tao energy. This was the reason why Zhang Wenfei couldn't draw out the yin-yang fish before. He didn't have enough Tao energy in his body. At this time, the Tao energy in my body had been greatly consumed, and there wasn't much left. However, I wasn't worried. I gently grabbed the jade bracelet and began to absorb the dragon vein energy. The consumption of Tao energy could be easily replenished with the dragon vein energy. However, I wasn't satisfied with a simple replenishment. After replenishing, I continued to absorb the dragon vein energy. I only stopped when Director Song Xing returned to the rostrum. At this time, there wasn't much dragon vein energy left in the jade bracelet. Although I was confident that I could escape unscathed from facing Han Wennan, it would be too arrogant of me to say that I could easily defeat him. He definitely lived up to his reputation as the #1 person in the younger generation. Therefore, I had to be extra cautious and make more preparations. The excess dragon vein energy that I absorbed just now could temporarily reside in my body. After the Tao energy in my body was consumed, it could be used as a supplement, allowing me to display greater strength. Director Song Xing brought the two of us to the rostrum. Just like before, he took out 2 different documents for us to sign at the same time. After finishing the final preparations, Director Song Xing left again, leaving only Han Wennan and me on the arena. The crowd below the arena cheered again. Everyone stared at the two of us without blinking. Even Zhang Kunlun, who had been sitting there absent-mindedly, now had a look of intense interest in his eyes. I looked at Han Wennan, who was standing in front of me. He looked honest and slow. Ever since I had met him, he had never looked at anyone except Zhang Kunlun. However, at this moment, after standing on the same arena as me, he had no choice but to open his eyes and look at me, who was standing in front of him. Han Wennan took the initiative to speak. Joey. He strangely only called my name once. Moreover, his tone was very slow, as though he was evaluating my name. After a while, he spoke again indifferently. You're very strong, but you're not my opponent. After saying that, he didn't give me a chance to refute. He took 2 steps back and said, "Make your move." Chapter 118. As the saying goes, the one who strikes first gains the upper hand, and the one who strikes last suffers the consequences. Facing Han Wennan, I didn't dare to slack off. Since he had given me the opportunity to attack, I wouldn't be polite to him. The Taoist energy that had been accumulated in my body for a long time surged into the Yama brush in an instant. As the yin and yang energy flowed on it, the yin and yang fish pattern appeared again. This time, the yin and yang fish pattern was more solid. It was no longer 2 misty black and white clouds of energy. Instead, it formed a complete 8 trigrams pattern. Although the edges were still a little blurry, it was quite clear on the whole. Although this was the second time I had drawn out this yin and yang fish pattern, I still felt very strange when I saw the faint fluctuations of Taoist rhymes on it. I always felt that there was something hidden in it that I couldn't understand. I put this thought aside for the time being and raised the Yama brush in my hand. Then, the pattern of the yin and yang fish, which contained a terrifying fluctuation of Taoist qi, also floated up. Under the effect of my Taoist qi, it kept spinning and pressing toward Han Wennan. At first, the yin and yang fish pattern was only the size of a washbasin. However, as it approached Han Wennan, I continued to guide the Taoist energy in my body into the Yama brush. As the yin and yang energy kept spurting out, the yin and yang fish pattern was as big as a millstone when it reached Han Wennan. The yin and yang energies in the huge pattern of the yin and yang fish were not static. Instead, they constantly revolved around each other, and contained an extremely terrifying power. Anyone who saw it would tremble with fear. At this time, Han Wennan finally moved. He no longer had his usual dull expression. Instead, he had a serious face as he raised his hands and placed them in front of his chest. Seeing his movements, I couldn't help but frown. As a member of the Han family in the Qinling Mountains, it was impossible that Han Wennan didn't have any powerful magic tools. However, facing such a terrifying yin and yang fish, he only raised his hand. Not to mention magic tools, he didn't even have a talisman with him. Did he want to use his Taoist energy to block my yin and yang fish out of thin air? Isn't this a little too arrogant? My eyes gradually turned cold. Not to mention that his Taoist energy was similar to mine, even if his Taoist energy was twice as strong as mine. Facing this yin and yang fish with only Taoist energy would only result in a tragic death. If Han Wennan was really so arrogant, then he would pay the price for his arrogance in the next second. However, shortly after, my face changed. Han Wennan still didn't take out his magic tool. However, the moment the yin and yang symbol was about to touch him, his hands suddenly moved. A series of complicated hand gestures were completed in less than a second. His hands were so fast that only afterimages could be seen. At the same time, he chanted a mysterious incantation. The art of hand seal. How was this possible? I looked at him in disbelief. The hand seal technique was something that could only be used after one had been baptized by the dragon energy and reached the pressure point realm. Had Han Wennan reached the second realm of the Geomaster realm? Then why did he come here to study the true dragon vein? I was shocked, but my hands didn't stop moving. I continued to control the huge yin and yang fish symbol to hit Han Wen'an's body. At this moment, Han Wen'an's hand seal was completed. His two hands were turned at a strange angle. His thumb was pinching his ring finger, his index finger was connecting with his little finger, and his middle finger was pointing at the yin and yang fish symbol. A thick stream of Taoist energy gushed out and shot towards the center of the yin and yang fish. The death scripture recorded many hand seals and incantations. However, I had never heard of the one that Han Wen'an was using. However, the power of this handprint was astonishing. After the chi of the Wei shot out from his middle finger shot into the yin-yang fish pattern, the flow of yin and yang chi on it suddenly stopped for a moment, and then suddenly became chaotic. The original order of the flow of yin and yang was completely broken. Even the Taoist energy in my body was affected by this chaos. I suddenly felt a tightness in my chest. I was shocked. Regardless of how Han Wen'an had used this hand seal technique, he looked like an honest person, but when he made his move, it was a move that could move 1,000 kilograms with little effort. It was easy for him to make my move, which I had gathered all my strength to use, collapse. His strength was truly terrifying. In the chaos, I didn't have time to adjust. Without reaching the pressure point realm, I couldn't control the Taoist energy in my body in detail. Especially since the Taoist energy in my body had reached a huge number, it was extremely difficult for me to carefully organize it. I clenched my teeth. If you can move 1,000 kilograms with little effort, then I can defeat everything with one move. I didn't move the Taoist energy in my body anymore. Instead, I directly cut off the connection between the Taoist energy and the Yama brush. Then, I turned the remaining Taoist energy in the brush into yang energy and injected it into the yin and yang fish. Originally, the yin and yang energy had to be balanced to form a stable yin and yang fish. Now, this balance was broken. The yin and yang energy were completely scattered and collided. It was just like when Zhang Wenfei used the Yama brush. He couldn't form the yin and yang fish. He could only collide with the yin and yang energy, causing them to explode and produce a huge force. At this time, I used the same method, but the yin and yang energy couldn't be compared to before. The huge amount of Taoist energy in my body, together with the extra chi of the dragon vein, transformed the yin and yang energy, which was dozens of times more than what Zhang Wenfei had. The amount of yin and yang energy determined the power of the explosion. There was a muffled sound, and in an instant, the yin and yang energy formed two rings, tightly wrapping Han Wen'an in the middle. Then, they intertwined and formed countless air waves that flew around Han Wen'an. For a moment, even Han Wen'an's figure couldn't be seen. The explosion of the yin and yang energy didn't seem to affect anything around it. The muffled sound wasn't loud, but in fact, the power of the collision had exploded from Han Wen'an's body. There was no leakage of power, and it had displayed the greatest lethality. The yin and yang energy that had exploded was the transformation of all the Taoist energy in my body. Han Wen'an's Taoist energy was similar to mine. If he didn't use all the Taoist energy in his body and use a defensive magic tool, I didn't believe that he could survive such a terrifying explosion of the yin and yang fish. My eyes were fixed on his position, but it was a pity that the countless air waves from the explosion had completely covered Han Wen'an's figure. I couldn't see what had happened to his body, nor could I tell if he had used a magic tool or not. Although I was confident that I could win, I didn't dare to be careless. I quietly put one hand on my chest and held the jade bracelet. I absorbed the last bit of the dragon vein chi into my body to replenish the Taoist energy that I had lost. It was fine if Han Wen'an admitted defeat after being severely injured. If he had survived the explosion of the yin and yang fish, I had to ensure that I could still fight. The dragon vein chi that the jade bracelet had absorbed seemed to have mutated. It was completely different from when I had faced the stone of Mount Tai. When I had faced the stone of Mount Tai, the Taoist energy in my body had increased, but the speed had been very slow. After the jade bracelet had absorbed the dragon vein chi from the stone of Mount Tai, I had absorbed it into my body at a very fast speed. It didn't take me long to convert it into Taoist energy. Especially now, I was only replenishing the Taoist energy that I had lost. The speed of the dragon vein chi replenishing was even faster. Before Han Wennan had reappeared, the dragon vein chi that I had absorbed had all been converted into Taoist energy. The only pity was that the last bit of dragon vein chi on the jade bracelet had been completely absorbed by me, when the Taoist energy in my body had been replenished by more than half. There was no more dragon chi on it. At that moment, the air waves produced by the explosion of the yin and yang fish finally dissipated. A tower-like figure reappeared in front of me. Han Wennan didn't collapse like I had imagined. Instead, he stood there like a man of steel. However, his body was extremely miserable. His clothes had been torn into strips of cloth. His face and body were covered with fine lines of blood. He looked extremely pathetic. However, his bronze-colored muscles seemed to have helped him block all the power. Apart from the small wounds on his body, there were no other visible injuries. That incomparably terrifying explosion had only caused him such a minor injury? My face was filled with disbelief. The yin and yang chi had been converted from the Taoist energy in my body. Of course, I knew how terrifying the power contained within it was. Han Wennan was able to block such a terrifying attack from me. He had even used the hand seal technique earlier. Could it be that he had really entered the acupuncture realm? That was the only explanation. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to believe it. However, Han Wennan spoke at that moment. He still spoke in his low and muffled voice. I didn't expect there to be an expert like you in the dragon-seeking realm. I had previously underestimated the heroes of the world. I thought that only Zhang Kunlun was worthy of me using the instrument. He stared at me with a burning gaze. Now, it seems that you are the one who is worthy of me using the instrument. From what he said, he should still be in the dragon-seeking realm. He wasn't at the acupuncture realm like I had imagined. Furthermore, his words sounded like he was praising me. However, I didn't care. He was indeed going to use the instrument. However, it wasn't because he said that I was worthy of him using the instrument. It was because I had beaten him to the point where he had no choice but to use the instrument. I still had some strength left. As for him, if he didn't use the instrument, he would be defeated immediately. The corner of my lips curled into a cold smile as I tightened my grip on the Yama brush. At that moment, a small leaf-shaped item appeared in Han Wennan's hand. However, he wasn't in a hurry to attack me. Instead, he lowered his head to look at the item that he had taken out. He said emotionally, I thought that the first time I would use the Celestial Master instrument that I had nurtured for so many years would be against Zhang Kunlun. I didn't expect that I would use it so early today. Chapter 119. A Celestial Master's Ritual Implement. My head buzzed, and I didn't even hear the rest of his words. Only these 4 words kept circling in my head. The Celestial Master realm was a godlike existence to any cultivator. So far, Yang Shilong, Yi Pianpian, and the others that I had met were all people with great power. But even they were only at the peak of the Earth Master realm. There was still a huge gap between them and the Celestial Master realm. What kind of power would a real Celestial Master have? And what kind of power would a Celestial Master's ritual implement have? I didn't have an answer to these questions, but I knew that this was definitely the most dangerous situation I would face in my life. I wasn't the only one who was shocked by these 4 words. The audience in the audience suddenly became quiet when they heard these 4 words. Then, they stood up with flushed faces. They craned their necks to look at Han Wennan, trying to see what the Celestial Master's ritual implement in his hand looked like. There was more than one person sighing at the same time. The Han family of Qinling is indeed a famous feng shui family. Han Wen'an, who is in the dragon-seeking realm, can actually use a celestial master's ritual implement. At this moment, Han Wen'an raised his head again and said, I'm not familiar with using a celestial master's ritual implement yet. Once I use it, there's no way I can stop. Brother Zhou, please be careful. Then, he didn't waste any more time. He gently raised the leaf in his hand, and I saw the leaf swell with the wind. In just a blink of an eye, it was as big as a bathtub. Its color was green, and each vein on its surface was clear. With a gust of cold wind, it swiftly flew toward me. In an instant, I recalled the magic sword that Yang Shilong had made of 9 copper coins. When he first took it out, the originally small copper coin sword suddenly grew bigger. At that time, Fang Xing even asked if he had nurtured the sword to the finest detail. I didn't know what nurturing the sword to the finest detail meant, but judging from Han Wen'an's celestial master's ritual implement, Yang Shilong should have also touched the threshold of the celestial master realm. Seeing the huge leaf flying toward me, I didn't dare to be careless. I poured the Tao energy in my body into the Yama brush again. However, this time, I didn't divide the Tao energy into 2 parts and pour it into the Yama brush. Instead, I used all the Tao energy in my body to guide the Yang energy into the Yama brush. At the same time, I chanted Tong Tong's name. Almost instantly, Tong Tong responded to my call. Of course, I wouldn't let Tong Tong appear on such an occasion. Instead, I asked her to inject her Yin energy into the Yama brush. Tong Tong had been by my side since I was a freshman. She stayed in the jade bracelet and kept practicing the art of godhood. After so many years, her realm of cultivation was no worse than mine. Moreover, because there were no difficulties in the early stage of the Yin soul cultivation, her current strength was even stronger than mine. Tong Tong didn't say anything. He immediately sent his Yin energy through my arm and into the Yama brush. Almost instantly, the amount of Yin energy in the Yama brush had reached the amount of Yang energy. I hurried to ask Tong Tong to stop. Then, I sent the last wisp of Tao energy in my body into the Yama brush. The Yin and Yang energies had reached an equilibrium. Although I didn't have enough Tao energy this time, and the total amount wasn't as much as the last time, with Tong Tong's help, the total amount of Yin and Yang energies was almost half of the previous time. The speed at which the yin-yang fish was formed was very fast. Moreover, after it was formed, the entire yin-yang fish pattern was very clear. It looked like a real object, not something created by the Tao energy. When the huge leaf flew toward me, the yin-yang fish, which wasn't smaller than the leaf, was formed. It blocked the leaf in front of the leaf and collided with it. Inside the yin-yang fish, the yin and yang qi circulated rapidly. With a powerful suction force, the leaf artifact was firmly attached to its body. The leaf artifact continued to grow strangely. The leaves on the edges looked very soft, like pieces of cloth. They continued to grow and wrapped around the yin-yang fish. It seemed that the yin-yang fish was going to be completely wrapped up by the leaf. Although I couldn't see the function of this magic tool, anyone who saw it would know that once the yin-yang fish was wrapped in the leaf, it wouldn't be able to survive. I had sent all the Tao energy in my body to the Yama brush. Although Tong Tong still had some energy left, he couldn't rely on the Yin energy in his eyes for much longer. The leaf was still growing, and it had wrapped around the edge of the yin-yang fish. Moreover, it continued to extend downward. What should I do now? Should I break the balance of the yin-yang fish like before and detonate it again? I glanced at the leaf. Han Wen'an had survived the explosion of the yin-yang fish. Although the power of the yin-yang fish had increased, it was still a heavenly master's magic tool. How could it not resist the explosion of the yin-yang fish? This method couldn't work. Once the yin-yang fish exploded, I wouldn't be able to fight anymore. As long as the leaf wasn't completely destroyed, Han Wen'an could continue to attack me. I wouldn't be able to resist then. While I was panicking, I grabbed the jade bracelet on my chest and tried to get more Tao energy. However, the dragon vein energy on it had disappeared a long time ago. How could it replenish my Tao energy? While I was panicking, Tong Tong inside the jade bracelet told me, "Brother, you can use the power in that bead." Bead? What bead? Instinctively, I touched my body and found a green bead. After a moment of bewilderment, I remembered that it was the item the Golden Head had given me in the Yellow Spring River. At that time, I didn't know what it was, and I still couldn't figure it out. I worriedly asked Tong Tong, "What is this? Why can't I feel its power?" "I don't know, but I can feel its terrifying power." "Brother, try to guide the bead's power to the magic tool." As the situation was critical, I had no choice but to try. I held the green bead in my hand and tried to guide its power. At first, I couldn't sense anything from the bead. However, after I tried, I could feel a flow of dark green energy flowing towards the Yamaluo brush. This dark green energy was very small, and it couldn't be compared to my Taoist qi or the yin qi in my eyes. However, this small dark green energy passed through Yama's brush and reached the yin-yang fish pattern. It dyed the entire yin-yang fish pattern dark green. However, it didn't look so eye-catching against the emerald green leaf magic tool. At the same time, the ever-growing leaf Dharma treasure seemed to have suddenly cut off its nutrients. It stopped growing almost instantly, and the edges trembled a little, even slowly shrinking back. I was startled. I didn't expect that such a small flow of energy could deal with this terrifying Heavenly Master magic tool. I lifted my head to look at Han Wennan. His face was pale, and his body was shivering. I could see that it wasn't easy for him to maintain this Heavenly Master magic tool. I finally saw the chance to win. I exhaled in relief. Then, I mobilized the power of the dark green bead and sent it to the Yama brush. Just like last time, I tried my best, but I could only mobilize a small part of the energy. I turned it into a green line and sent it through the Yama brush to the yin-yang fish pattern. This time, the green color of the yin-yang fish pattern became thicker. Moreover, the green energy wasn't evenly distributed in the entire pattern. Instead, it gathered around the edges. As the green energy gathered around, Han Wennan's leaf magic tool shrank faster and faster. By the time the green energy reached the edge of the yin-yang fish pattern, the leaf magic tool had returned to its original size, almost the same size as the yin-yang fish. When the dark green energy reached the edge of the yin-yang fish pattern, it didn't change. Instead, it dyed the edge of the yin-yang fish pattern green. The yin-yang fish was the yin and yang symbol of the Tai Chi to a geomancy master. This pattern represented perfection. When I saw the yin-yang fish, I thought it was perfect. However, I didn't know why, but when I looked at the green circle around the yin-yang fish pattern, I felt that the previous yin-yang fish pattern wasn't perfect. Only the pattern in front of me could be considered perfect. This thought flashed in my mind for a moment before I threw it to the back of my head. Are you kidding me? The yin and yang symbol of the Tai Chi is the foundation of metaphysics. If I thought that the yin-yang fish pattern wasn't perfect, wouldn't I be abandoning the foundation of metaphysics? After I calmed down, I turned to look at Han Wennan. His face had turned dark green, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. It seemed he had reached his limit. While I was hesitating about whether I should use the dark green bead or not, Han Wennan finally vomited blood. His body turned soft, and he directly fell to the ground. At the same time, the leaf magic tool that was resisting the yin-yang fish pattern lost its support. It trembled and returned to its original shape. Then, it directly fell to the ground. However, it was a Celestial Master's magical tool, so it didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it flew back to Han Wennan. Although I wanted the Celestial Master's magical tool, it was still a Celestial Master's magical tool. Moreover, the other party was the Han family of the Qinling Mountains. I hesitated for a while, but I didn't dare to snatch it. Moreover, the Metaphysics Association didn't give me the chance to do so. When Han Wennan fell to the ground, the medical staff came. When the leaf magic tool returned to his body, the people from the Metaphysics Association had already carried Han Wennan away. After that, Director Song Xing also returned to the rostrum. After staring at me for a while, he announced the final result. Chapter 120. Even after Director Song Xing announced the result, I was still in a daze. Han Wennan, the publicly recognized number 1 of the younger generation, the number 1 expert in the dragon-seeking realm, was defeated by me just like that? Although I was confident that I could compete with Han Wennan, I definitely didn't expect to win in the end. The reason why I challenged him was just for Zhang Wenfei and for myself. I didn't expect that my dream would come true in the end. At that moment, everyone's eyes were focused on me, including all the young geniuses in the A and B areas. I glanced down and saw Zhang Kunlun from the Hunan Metaphysics Society in District A. He was from the Zhang family of Mount Mang. He still wore a sincere smile, but his eyes were bright as he gazed at me. It seemed he wanted to remember me. The corners of my mouth lifted slightly as I smiled. Then, I turned back to look at Han Wennan, who had just been carried off the stage. Although I defeated him, I had to admit that he definitely had the strength to be the number 1 of the younger generation. The Taoist energy in my body had already reached the Qi-gathering pillar realm, but he was actually stronger than me. In a situation where I only relied on my own strength, I used the Yama pen with all my strength, but he only relied on his Taoist energy to contend against me. In the end, even when I used the power of Tong Tong, he took out a celestial master instrument and almost completely suppressed me. If it wasn't for Tong Tong reminding me that the magical pearl contained a terrifying power, I would have been the one who lost in the end. Although I hate their arrogant attitude, opponents like them are worthy of my respect. After signing the document provided by Director Song Xing, I lifted my feet and walked down the stage. At that moment, everyone's eyes were still on me. Everyone watched me return to my seat in the Guangdong branch before looking away. The people of the Guangdong branch also gathered by my side, including Su Shuxing, who had a conflict with me before. He could no longer maintain the arrogance on his face, as he came to my side and congratulated me on my victory like everyone else. Finally, he said to me awkwardly, "Brother Zhou, there were many misunderstandings before. Please don't take it to heart, Brother Zhou." I smiled faintly. I didn't take him seriously from the beginning, so naturally, I didn't mind. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I returned the yin-yang Yama brush to Zhang Wenfei and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, I'm using your magic tool to help you take revenge. But in reality, without your magic tool, I wouldn't have been able to defeat the 2 of them. Brother Zhang, this mystic instrument of yours is truly extraordinary. When you are baptized by the dragon energy in the future and reach the realm of strike of acupoints, I'm afraid I won't be your match just with this mystic instrument." When Zhang Wenfei heard this, a bitter smile hung on his face. He looked like he was struggling as he said, "Although this is a magic tool passed down by my sect, why do I feel that it will be more useful in your hands?" After he finished speaking, he was silent for a moment before he sighed and said, "Actually, I should have given this yin-yang Yama brush to you. It's just that this is an artifact passed down from my master's lineage. I'm really—" Looking at his ashamed expression, I hurriedly interrupted him. "What are you saying? If you give it to me, won't Lord Zhao break your legs when we get back?" As I spoke, I stuffed the yin-yang Yama brush into his hands and comforted him. "Don't think that this magic tool is very useful in my hands right now. That's just because your cultivation isn't high enough. After all, this is an artifact of your sect. When we reach the realm of strike of acupoints in the future, you might be even more powerful than me when you use it." Although I said that, in reality, I was still somewhat reluctant to part with it. All along, the only magic tool I had come into contact with was the magic compass, and that was only an auxiliary magic tool. It had miraculous effects when used to search for dragons, seal acupoints, or assist in cultivation, but it couldn't be used in battle. Zhang Wenfei's yin-yang yama brush was the first time I had come into contact with a magic tool that could be used in battle. Moreover, in my opinion, this magic tool was incomparably strange. It wasn't inferior to Han Wenan's Heavenly Master magic tool. Of course, this might be because Han Wenan wasn't able to display the true power of the Heavenly Master magic tool. However, based on its previous performance, I truly felt that the yin-yang yama brush was stronger. The yin-yang yama fish, which symbolized the yin and yang of Tai Chi, seemed to contain the ultimate principles of metaphysics. How could the leaf magic tool that only knew how to enlarge compare to it? Moreover, looking at the yin-yang yama brush, I always felt that there was an even greater power within it, but I had no way of displaying it. To be honest, I really did have the thought of taking it for myself. However, a gentleman has his limits. No matter what it is, it has to be done in a proper way. Thus, in the end, I clenched my teeth and returned it to Zhang Wenfei. Zhang Wenfei opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only sighed and said nothing. Up until now, my 2 consecutive life and death battles had finally ended. Today, the Metaphysics Association's real activity, the championship competition, could finally begin again. After Director Song Xing sent away the documents of the previous life and death duels, he returned to the rostrum after 10 minutes. He announced that the championship competition would begin again, and those who had participated in it returned to the rostrum. However, it was a pity that Zhang Wenfei, Lu Zhenyang, and even Han Wenan were severely injured and couldn't participate in the championship. Only a few people were left standing on the rostrum, looking at each other in dismay. They didn't know what to do. Director Song Xing also felt that this matter was a bit absurd. He walked over to discuss with a few people. It seemed that they were prepared to cease all activities and cancel the championship competition. All rankings would be conducted according to the previous year's rules. However, just as Director Song Xing was about to announce this, someone suddenly stood up. He looked short and thin, and with a sharp voice, he said, "The Yunnan branch's champion, Bai Chiwen, challenges the Guangdong branch." Hearing his words, everyone was stunned. I also turned around to take a look. This dark and thin Bai Chiwen looked like he was sitting in the last row, in the Gui area. In fact, Yunnan was a place where the power of metaphysics was very strong. It wasn't any weaker than the super branches of the Metaphysics Association. However, the power of metaphysics in Yunnan was mostly based on the path of witchcraft that didn't communicate with the Central Plains. There were very few people who participated in the Metaphysics Association, so they could only be ranked last among the major branches of the Metaphysics Association. When Director Song Xing heard his words, he frowned. However, he immediately said, "During the championship, the branches at the back can challenge the branches at the front at any time. The people from the Guangdong branch and the Yunnan branch come up to the rostrum." After he said that, everyone from the Guangdong branch, including me, had a change in expression. According to the rules of the championship, once the members of each branch were confirmed, they couldn't be changed. This meant that no matter which branch challenged us, they could only send the seriously injured Zhang Wenfei to fight. This was also one of the reasons why no branch was willing to participate in the championship for so many years. If they didn't succeed in their challenge and got seriously injured, not only would they not be able to get a higher position, they might even lose their own position. But generally speaking, no one would be so shameless as to forcefully snatch such a spot. Once they did such a thing, they would become mortal enemies. The branch below them would definitely not dare to offend the branch above them, unless they had lost their minds. But this Bai Chiwen of the Yunnan branch, what was he up to? Was he trying to snatch a position before the exam? This matter definitely wasn't that simple. I frowned and looked at Han Wenan and Lu Zhenyang. At this moment, the two of them had already woken up. Han Wen'an was sitting there with her eyes closed, as if she was recuperating. Lu Zhenyang had a sinister smile on his face as he looked at me. In an instant I understood. The reason why this Bai Chiwen of the Yunnan branch had such guts was definitely because of Lu Zhenyang's instructions. With the capital branch's guarantee and Lu Zhenyang's instructions, Bai Chiwen naturally didn't need to be afraid of our Guangdong branch. Although I defeated Lu Zhenyang was a member of the Lu family in the capital. If I had to choose someone to offend, no one would choose me, who was alone, and not Lu Zhenyang, who had an incomparably powerful family. Bai Chiwen proudly walked up to the platform. We were silent for a long time. Finally, I stood up and announced that I was giving up on the championship. Their methods were shameless, but they were very effective. Thus, the Guangdong branch's ranking was pushed from the original 8th place to the 9th place, and the Yunnan branch obtained the qualification to observe the true dragon vein. I originally thought that Lu Zhenyang's methods were over, but I didn't expect that I had greatly underestimated his shamelessness. Following that, the dozens of metaphysics associations leaders behind us stood up one after another and announced that they would challenge the Guangdong branch. Just like that, our ranking continued to slide until we reached the last place before it was finally over. Although I didn't care about this ranking, nor did I care about observing the true dragon vein, the other members of the Guangdong branch cared. This ranking might even affect their future development. I turned my head to look at Bai Chiwen and the others, then raised my head to look at Lu Zhenyang, who was still looking at me with a sinister gaze. I remembered their names in my heart. Chapter 121. The competition for the champion position had finally come to an end. After Director Song Xing announced the results, everyone started to leave the hall in an orderly manner. After this battle, the biggest winner was the Yunnan branch. They went from the last place to the 8th place. The biggest loser was naturally our Guangdong branch. We went from the 8th place to the last place. As for the other branches, they challenged us according to their original ranking. In the end, there wasn't any difference from the initial ranking. After everyone had left, only the members of our Guangdong branch were left in the hall. Everyone had a gloomy expression on their faces. They sat there without moving or speaking, especially Zhang Wenfei. His complexion was pale after being injured. Currently, his face was filled with guilt. He sat there and bit his lips. His complexion was extremely bad. In the end, I stood up and called for everyone to leave the hall and return to our respective rooms. After returning at night, Zhang Wenfei was still sitting in his room gloomily. He didn't say a word. He didn't even touch his chopsticks when dinner was served. I didn't know how to console him. I just went to ask him about his injuries. I heaved a sigh of relief when I found out that he would need around 10 days to recover. His injuries would definitely affect his ability to observe the true dragon's vein. If it was according to his previous ranking, Zhang Wenfei definitely wouldn't be able to adjust his body's condition to its peak. Now that he was in the last place, it might be good news for him. On the other hand, Han Wen'an and Lu Zhenyang's injuries were similar to his. The two of them were among the first to enter the branch. If something happened to them while they were observing the true dragon vein because of their injuries, it would be a huge problem. However, the two of them were from prestigious families. Their innate talents were extremely strong. No matter if it was their families or the Metaphysics Society, they wouldn't just watch the situation unfold. They would definitely think of a way to help them. I comforted Zhang Wenfei, but the guilt on his face didn't dissipate. I sighed. I knew that I wouldn't be able to persuade him, so I could only go back to my bed and lie down. Zhang Wenfei felt very guilty towards the other members of the branch. In fact, I didn't feel good either. Although he had volunteered to fight, I was the one who made the final decision. Moreover, Lu Zhenyang had used such a method to deal with the Guangdong Metaphysics Society because I had defeated him in front of everyone. In terms of responsibility, I was obviously more responsible than Zhang Wenfei. It was just that Zhang Wenfei had taken all the responsibility on his own initiative. The other members of the Guangdong branch didn't blame me. The next morning, as soon as Zhang Wenfei and I woke up, we heard that the Shaanxi branch, which was ranked first, had given up their spot to the Hunan branch. At this moment, the people from the Hunan branch had been picked up by the Metaphysics Association. They should have gone to the true dragon vein. I guessed that Han Wenan's injuries weren't light and he hadn't fully recovered yet. Thus, Zhang Kunlun was given the opportunity. After one night of contemplation, Zhang Wenfei seemed to have accepted what had happened. In the morning, he took the initiative to talk to me. I'm going to apologize to the other members of the Guangdong branch. Then, I'll use the next few days to talk to them about cultivation problems. If I can help them increase their realms, it will be a small compensation. Then, he apologized to me, saying that he shouldn't have acted rashly that day. His words made me blush with shame. I smiled wryly and said, "Both of us are responsible for this. Why are you apologizing to me? Let's go find someone else." Then, we went to call the other 8 members of the Guangdong branch and publicly apologized to them. After going through this ordeal, the 10 members of our branch were unprecedentedly united. Although the others were gloomy, they didn't purposely make things difficult for us. Everyone sighed and angrily cursed Lu Zhenyang from the Yunnan branch and the Beijing branch. No one was a fool. After yesterday's incident, it was easy to see who was behind it. Afterwards, when Zhang Wenfei expressed that he wanted to discuss cultivation issues, everyone expressed great interest. However, no one looked at Zhang Wenfei. Instead, they looked at me with shining eyes. It was obvious that they had seen my strength when I defeated Han Wenan yesterday and wanted to learn something from me. I naturally didn't hide anything and quickly started to discuss with everyone. At our stage, what we were most concerned about was how to increase our Tao energy and how to quickly and fully absorb the Dragon Vein's qi. After the others asked what they wanted to know, I was dumbfounded. It was true that I had already reached the qi-gathering pillar realm, but I didn't have the answers to the questions about increasing Tao energy and absorbing the Dragon Vein's qi. This was because I used the jade bracelet to absorb the Dragon Vein's qi to increase my Tao energy, so I didn't have any reference points. On the contrary, Zhang Wenfei shared his experience and explained what to pay attention to when absorbing the Dragon Vein's qi, how to absorb it as quickly as possible, and how to fully absorb it afterwards. After listening to him, I understood that there was a lot of knowledge hidden in the details. If it were me, I wouldn't have paid attention to these things. Only people like Zhang Wenfei, who came from a prestigious family, would have their predecessors summarize these things bit by bit and form a set of theories for future generations to learn from. Although Zhang Wenfei's master, Zhao Dingwu, was just an ordinary feng shui master, his senior brothers and the martial uncles of his sect were all extraordinary feng shui masters. Although their sect couldn't compare to the Han family of Qinling Mountains or the Zhang family of Mount Mang, it wasn't an exaggeration to call them a prestigious family. Unfortunately, what Zhang Wenfei said didn't have much effect on me. After all, I had reached the qi-gathering pillar realm, so I wouldn't be able to absorb much Dragon Vein's qi. So, after discussing with them for a day, I didn't go to the gathering the next day. I stayed in my room and took out the mysterious dark green bead. I held it in my hand and carefully observed it. Just like before, I couldn't feel anything from this bead. It looked like an ordinary plastic bead, not much different from a child's toy that could be sold for 1 or 2 yuan on the street. However, after what had happened that day, I couldn't see it that way anymore. Although the dark green energy was very small, its power was amazing. If I could master that power, even if I didn't have Zhang Wenfei's Yin-Yang Yama pen, I could still fight against Han Wenan. Unfortunately, after studying it for a long time, I still didn't have any clues. In the end, I had no choice but to call Tong Tong out and ask her, "What is the energy inside this bead? Why can't I feel it?" and it seems to be completely different from Taoist Qi. Tong Tong looked at me with a puzzled face. She didn't know anything and timidly said that she could only feel the power in it, but she didn't know what it was. She also didn't know what I meant when I said it was different from Taoist Qi. Tong Tong was a Yin soul, and the power she cultivated was different from Taoist Qi. She didn't know what Taoist Qi was. Feeling helpless, I had to give up on studying this power. As long as I could use it, I didn't care what kind of power it was. I held the bead with both hands and closed my eyes. Then, I began to slowly move the power in it. What was different from yesterday was that I had moved the power to the yin-yang yama pen. Today, I moved the power and absorbed it directly into my body. Everything went smoothly. Although I could only move a small amount of that dark green energy, I could easily draw it out and absorb it into my body, gathering it in the Taoist Qi column. It was just like the yin-yang fish pattern that had been dyed green yesterday. After the dark green energy gathered in the Taoist Qi column, it quickly turned into a green membrane that covered the entire column. After I was done, I put the dark green bead aside and took out an ordinary scorching sun talisman. Then, I guided the Taoist energy that was wrapped in a green film onto the scorching sun talisman. Soon, the scorching sun talisman exploded, and a light green flame ignited on it. I was startled. In the past, the burning sun talisman had a bright yellow flame. Now, with the addition of the dark green energy, the flame had turned into a strange color. However, what surprised me more was that I couldn't feel the temperature rise even though there was a big flame burning in front of me. Did the burning sun talisman's flame lose its temperature because of the green energy? If that was the case, what was the use of this burning sun talisman? I thought for a while, then picked up the glass ashtray next to the bed. I wanted to use it to test the temperature of the flame. However, as soon as the ashtray touched the light green flame, the glass ashtray exploded. What's going on? Glass could easily explode when the temperature difference was too high. However, the room temperature was normal, so ordinary flames couldn't have such an effect. Could it be that the temperature of the light green flame was that high? I wasn't sure yet. I looked around and found a small iron plate on the table. I carefully put it above the flame to heat it up. The result was even more terrifying this time. The bottom of the small metal plate that came into contact with the light green flame turned red almost instantly. Then, it softened at a speed visible to the naked eye, and a small hole appeared. Molten iron slowly flowed out of the hole. I didn't remember the melting point of iron, but it had to be at least 1,000 degrees. Ordinary flames only had a temperature of a few hundred degrees. The power of this dark green energy was actually so terrifying. Chapter 122. Thinking of this, I became completely excited. I threw the hot metal plate to the side and returned to my bed. I held the dark green bead in my hand and continued to absorb it. I could only absorb a small amount of this dark green energy at a time. It was very little, but many a little makes a lot. I wasn't discouraged and slowly absorbed it bit by bit. I didn't stop until Zhang Wenfei came back at night. The strange thing was that as soon as Zhang Wenfei saw me, he frowned slightly. After thinking for a while, he asked me in confusion, "Zhou Yi, your realm is higher than mine. Although I couldn't sense your realm before, I could always sense the surging Dao Qi in your body. But why can't I sense the fluctuation of Dao Qi in your body at all today?" I was stunned. The Dao Qi pillar in my body was still wrapped by the dark green energy. Could it be that this energy isolated the Dao Qi in my body so that others couldn't see my realm? Thinking about it carefully, it was really possible. Just like that dark green bead. It clearly contained such a strong power, but if it wasn't for Tong Tong's reminder, I wouldn't have felt it at all. The power from before had already shocked me. Now, I found another effect that could hide one's aura. What could this ordinary-looking bead hide? I smiled and said to Zhang Wenfei, "This is because I dispersed the Dao Qi in my body just now." Why don't you try to feel it again? As I said that, I mobilized the dark green energy and hid it beside the Dao Qi pillar. In an instant, the surging Dao Qi surged out of my body again. Zhang Wenfei nodded as if he understood. He didn't ask any more and returned to his bed. Originally, I wanted to rest, but at that moment, I suddenly felt the dark green energy in my body suddenly separate from the Dao Qi pillar. Next to the Dao Qi pillar, it formed a dark green light pillar that was as thin as a silk thread. I was stunned. The dark green energy was still the same. It was just that the shape had changed a little. However, this light pillar that was as thin as a silk thread was exactly the same as the Dao Qi thread that I had formed when I had just entered the Earth Master realm. What did this mean? This meant that there was another power in my body that wasn't Dao Qi but was even stronger than Dao Qi. If this light thread continued to develop, would it eventually form something similar to the Dao Qi pillar? If that was the case, there would be another Dao Qi pillar in my body. More importantly, this strange power could actually fuse with Taoist Qi. At that time, I would still be in the dragon summoning realm. Who could be my opponent? Han Wennan? That was impossible. In the world of metaphysics, anyone would know that there could only be one Dao Qi pillar. Just like the meridians of a person's soul, a person could only form one. This was an unchanging truth since ancient times. What was this dark green bead? Why would there be another one in my body? No matter how I thought about it, I couldn't understand the reason behind it. However, it was still a good thing. I sat there, feeling extremely excited. However, after I had calmed down, I suddenly thought of another problem. This dark green energy was absorbed from the dark green bead that the golden head had given me. It couldn't be obtained from any other place. I lowered my head to look at the dark green bead. Since I couldn't see its energy fluctuations, I couldn't estimate whether it had enough energy to support me to the Qi-gathering pillar realm or not. After thinking for a long time, I suddenly thought of another problem. This dark green energy was absorbed from the dark green bead that the golden head gave me. It couldn't be obtained from any other place. I sat there and pondered for a long time. In the end, I suddenly thought that since this dark green energy could be combined with the Taoist Qi, could I also transfer the Taoist Qi to the other thread of light? It was highly possible. My heart started to beat faster. If that was the case, I wouldn't need to worry about whether the dark green bead had enough energy or not. I just needed Dao Qi. Moreover, I was going to observe the true dragon vein. When the time came, I would fill up both Dao Qi pillars and start the dragon energy baptism. At that time, I would have at least twice the amount of Dao Qi compared to others to break through the meridians. The pressure point realm required Dao Qi to break through the meridians. At that time, the more Dao Qi I had, the more meridians I could open. This means that I have a high chance of opening up even more meridians. If my talent could only open half a meridian, then I would be able to open a whole meridian. If my talent could open a whole meridian, then I would be able to open 2 meridians. At that time, even if my talent wasn't as good as those peerless geniuses, I would still have twice the chance. How much worse would I be compared to them? This time, I couldn't calm down. As I sat there, I was so excited that I started to sweat. In this state, I didn't dare to move my Dao Qi. I just lay on the bed. It wasn't until late at night that I finally calmed down. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei had fallen asleep. I sat up on the bed and closed my eyes. I read the calm heart mantra a few times to confirm that my body and mind were calm. Then, I moved the Dao energy in the Dao energy column, sending it to the other dark green light. Just as I had imagined, the dark green light thread didn't resist the Dao Qi. Instead, it happily accepted the Dao Qi into its own light thread. Not long after, a new light pillar appeared next to the original Dao Qi pillar. However, it was dark green and the original light was mixed together. It looked a little dark. However, it didn't matter. My conjecture had been proven. It was completely feasible. I moved the dark green energy once again and moved it to the original Dao Qi pillar. At first, it was fine. However, when the dark green energy disappeared, the new Dao Qi pillar couldn't be maintained anymore. It immediately dispersed and gathered on the original Dao Qi pillar. It seemed that the foundation of this new Dao Qi pillar was the dark green energy. Without that energy, it couldn't be maintained with just Dao Qi. Then, I repeated the previous process and divided the Dao Qi pillar into two. After I was done, I sat there and furrowed my brows. An idea that shocked even myself popped up in my mind. Previously, when the green energy on the new light pillar was removed, the light pillar did not disappear until all the green energy was removed. Only then did the light pillar disappear. What if I didn't move the green energy to the original Dao Qi pillar and let it create a new light pillar? What would happen? My heart was pounding. Under such circumstances, it wasn't safe to move the Dao Qi. However, I didn't want to wait any longer. I suppressed my excitement and removed a part of the dark green energy from the light pillar and moved it elsewhere. In the blink of an eye, the third light pillar was formed in my body. It actually worked. I hurriedly moved the Dao Qi and divided it equally among the three light pillars. Still, there was no problem. If there was a third light pillar, could there be a fourth, a fifth, 100th? If that was the case, how many meridians would I be able to open in the future? Would I have to open all 8 extraordinary meridians and become an 8-meridian Earth Master? I didn't dare to think further. I gritted my teeth and excitedly continued to separate the dark green energy. Soon, the 4th light pillar appeared. The 5th light pillar appeared. The 6th pillar. When the 6th pillar of light appeared, the first pillar of light formed by the dark green energy suddenly dissipated. The Qi of the Way and the dark green energy all dissipated and quickly gathered on the other pillars of Qi of the Way. Could it be that the dark green energy wasn't enough? I observed carefully. The 4 newly formed energy pillars had different amounts of dark green energy. The one with the least amount of dark green energy was very little. It was only 1/10 of the light pillar that had just dissipated. To confirm, I absorbed some energy from the dark green bead and tried to create the 6th light pillar. The result was the same. It seemed that it wasn't a problem of the amount of dark green energy. I tried many other methods and found that it was impossible to succeed. It seemed that I could only maintain 5 Dao Qi pillars. Even so, I was excited. 5 Dao Qi pillars meant 5 times the amount of Dao Qi others had. If I had the talent of a 1-meridian Earth Master, I would be able to open 5 meridians. That would be even more terrifying than Yi Piampian. What peerless genius! What Han Wennan! What Lu Zhenyang! They wouldn't be able to compare to me. Even if my original talent was only half a meridian, I would be able to open 2.5. That would be close to Yi Piampian's talent. I wouldn't dare to compare to those famous people in history, but at least I would be able to amaze everyone at the Rising Phoenix gathering. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay there with my mind full of wild thoughts. Ever since I came into contact with metaphysics, I had always thought that my talent was mediocre. I had relied on the death scripture to progress smoothly. However, I didn't dare to have any wild hopes for the future. Only now did I feel that I might be able to make a name for myself in the metaphysics world. I didn't do anything for the rest of the night. I just lay there and stared at the ceiling, smiling foolishly. It wasn't until the next day that I finally calmed down. No matter what, talent was something in the future. It couldn't be used now. Before talent could be considered an ability, everything else was useless. After Zhang Wenfei got up, he continued to talk with his colleagues from the Metaphysics Association. I sat in my room and calmed myself down. Then, I continued to absorb the dark green energy. Although I couldn't form a new Dao Qi pillar, the dark green energy itself had great power. After absorbing it, I could use it more freely. The day passed quickly. Zhang Wenfei returned to his room that night. This time, he didn't come back alone. He came with the other members of the Guangdong Metaphysics Association. They all had angry expressions on their faces and their steps were hurried. After entering the room, I noticed that they were carrying a person. I lowered my head and saw that it was Su Shuxing. His face was dark and his eyes were closed. It was obvious that he had fainted. What's going on? Chapter 123. The Yunnan branch did this? I didn't have time to ask. I asked them to put Su Shuxing on the bed. Then, I went to check his body. Su Shuxing's face darkened. At first glance, I thought he was poisoned. After a closer look, I found that he was indeed poisoned. However, it wasn't a simple case of poisoning. He had been hit by poisonous Tao energy, which was why he was showing symptoms of being poisoned. I had heard that some geomancy masters didn't have magic tools to use, and their Tao energy or talismans weren't powerful enough. That was why they had to find another way. When they cultivated their Tao energy, they had to take poisons to force the poison into their Tao energy and fuse it with the Tao energy. This way, the Tao energy could carry the poison and increase its power. When I heard about this, I thought it was unbelievable. If the Tao energy wasn't pure enough, it would affect one's future progress. Moreover, it would be much more difficult to control the magic tools. I didn't expect that someone would do this in real life. After finding out the reason, I moved the Tao energy in my body and transferred it to Su Shuxing's body. Tao energy was a very powerful energy. As long as the cultivator had the Tao energy to protect him, ordinary poisons couldn't harm him. Su Shuxing was poisoned because someone had scattered the Tao energy in his body. After I transferred my Tao energy into his body, Su Shuxing woke up. He didn't have time to talk. He sat cross-legged and moved the Tao energy in his body to slowly expel the poison. I heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on a nearby chair. Su Shuxing, what happened? Zhang Wenfei's face was still full of resentment. There's a public area not far from the dormitory area. Today we felt bored, so we went out to sit for a while. Coincidentally, we met the people from the Yunnan branch. We didn't pay attention to them at first, but they sat not far away from us and purposely said that they were going to observe the true dragon vein in a few days. They even said that some of the branches were ranked last, and they didn't know if one of them would successfully reach the acupoint realm in the end. After listening to him, Su Shuxing couldn't help but stand up and argue with them. In the end, both sides quarreled and almost started a fight. However, since the people from the headquarters were there, they didn't fight. After that, the people of the Yunnan branch left first. We thought it was over. Unexpectedly, when we were on the way back to the dormitory area, we were stopped by Chiwen and his people. This time, there was no one from the headquarters. Bai Chiwen attacked directly. He wasn't very strong, but I was injured and couldn't fight back. The others were no match for him. In the end, Su Shuxing was seriously injured, and the others were more or less injured, Su Shuxing said. Yunnan branch, Bai Chiwen. I still had some impressions of this person. At that time, I felt that he was thin and small and looked very wretched. As expected, one's appearance was born from one's heart. His methods were also very shameless. You didn't report this to the headquarters? I asked with a frown. Zhang Wenfei shook his head. The headquarters has a written rule that anyone who causes trouble here, regardless of the reason, will be immediately expelled. If the headquarters found out about this, all of us would be expelled. That's why we didn't dare to report it. We could only suffer in silence. At this time, Su Shuxing also got rid of the poison in his body. He struggled to get up from the bed and said weakly, Bai Chiwen used this rule to sneak attack us. If I'm not wrong, they will hide in their rooms for the next few days. They won't let us find a chance to take revenge. That's right. Zhang Wenfei nodded. He slammed his fist on the table and angrily said, If I wasn't injured, I would have made those bastards pay the price. But now, it's too late. I'm afraid we won't be able to find a chance to take revenge. The others also had resentful expressions. Some of them even suggested that we directly go to the Yunnan branch's room and fight to the death with them. In any case, we were the last ones to observe the true dragon's vein. We might as well die together. Before I could say anything, Su Shuxing shook his head and said, "We don't know what we're doing. The people from the Yunnan branch don't have much talent. Even if they come here, they're just here to accompany the crown prince. If we perish together with them, we'll be the ones to suffer." I was surprised. Su Shuxing had a fiery temper. I had seen it more than once. How could he be so calm this time? Everyone became silent. Our Guangdong branch was ranked 8. We were one of the top branches in the country. If we perished together with the Yunnan branch, it would be too much of a loss. But if we didn't do this, what else could we do? Should we just admit defeat? At this time, Su Shuxing suddenly grinned and said, "My talent isn't high. I can't compare to Zhou Yi and Zhang Wenfei. Moreover, I'm also injured. I'm afraid it will affect my ability to observe the true dragon's vein. How about this? I'll simply give up this opportunity and go to the headquarters to report this matter. In any case, I'm the one who's seriously injured. Although you guys were there, you didn't do anything. When the time comes, I'll exchange for those Yunnan bastards. It won't be a loss." "How can we do that?" Zhang Wenfei hurriedly refused. The others didn't want to either. However, Su Shuxing seemed to have steeled his heart. No matter what, he wouldn't listen. He immediately endured the pain and went to find the headquarters. In the end, I pulled him back and said with a smile, "Don't be so impulsive. There are many ways to deal with them. Why do you have to use this method of killing 10,000 enemies and injuring 8,000 yourself?" They did such a thing during the ranking competition. I didn't go to find them, but they came to find us first. They really don't know what's good for them. As soon as I said that, Zhang Wenfei was the first to understand what I meant. He turned around and frowned at me. "Zhou Yi, what do you mean? Are you going to find them?" I nodded. "Of course. But they will definitely stay in their rooms for the next few days and won't come out. If you go to find them, there are 10 of them. If you go alone..." Zhang Wenfei's voice sounded hesitant. I smiled and joked, "You're looking down on me. I defeated Han Wennan a few days ago. Do you think the 10 people from the Yunnan branch can beat me?" This time, Su Shuxing spoke first. "But if you use the Yinyang Yama pen, the commotion will be too big. It's very likely that the Metaphysics Association will notice it." I shook my head. "I don't need the Yama pen to deal with them." "You don't need the Yama pen?" Zhang Wenfei looked at me solemnly. "Zhou Yi, I know that you're powerful, but Bai Qiwen isn't to be trifled with. In terms of Daoqi, Bai Qiwen is far inferior to you. However, his Daoqi contains poison. It'll be very troublesome to deal with him. Moreover, there are 10 of them. Their combined Daoqi will definitely be more than yours. Even if you use the Yama pen, it'll still be troublesome to deal with the 10 of them. Let's not talk about not using the Yama pen. In my opinion, we should wait for Su Shuxing and I to recover from our injuries. Then, we can go together before they go to observe the true dragon vein. As long as we're careful, it'll be possible to avoid being discovered by the people from the headquarters." What he said made sense, but that was before I had obtained that strange dark green power. Now that I had that power, the number of bastards in the Yunnan branch would double. I wouldn't even need to use Yama's brush to deal with them. However, I couldn't explain this to them, so I could only pretend to give up on taking revenge by myself. I shook my head and said, "All right, this matter isn't urgent. Su Shuxing and Zhang Wenfei are still injured. Let's go back and rest first. We'll gather tomorrow morning to discuss this matter and come up with a plan." Currently, my prestige in the Guangzhou branch was very strong. After I said that, the others didn't have any objections. They temporarily separated and returned to their respective rooms to rest. After the others left, Zhang Wenfei sat on the bed and remained silent for a while. Then, he sighed and said, "It's all my fault. I let those clowns in the Yunnan branch step on our heads and steal our spots. They even provoked us. Damn it. I didn't know how to comfort him, so I walked over and patted his shoulder, telling him to rest early. Zhang Wenfei sat there and sighed for a long time. In the end, he could only lie down and sleep angrily. After he slept, I did some simple exercises. I told Zhang Wenfei that I was going to check on Su Shuxing's injuries. Then, I got up and left. After I left, I didn't go to find Su Shuxing. Instead, I went directly to the Gui area. Although the Yunnan branch had taken our spot in the ranking competition, their rooms hadn't changed. They were still staying in the last few rooms in the Gui area. When I got there, I didn't know which room Bai Chiwen was in, so I randomly picked a room and knocked on the door. However, no one came to open the door. Feeling helpless, I could only walk along the Gui area and search from the back to the front. I found the room with the number Gui Shin. Before I could knock on the door, I heard some chaotic noises inside. I couldn't find anyone in the other rooms, and this room was very messy. I guessed that all the members of the Yunnan branch were gathered in this room. It was better this way. I didn't have to search room by room. Chapter 124. After reaching the Earth Master realm, under the nourishment of Tao Qi, a Feng Shui master's bodily functions were much stronger than those of ordinary people. Even in such a noisy environment, the people in the room could still hear me knocking on the door. Soon they quieted down. After a while, there was no movement in the room, as though they were discussing something. I wasn't in a hurry, so I stood there and waited patiently. About a minute later, there was finally the sound of footsteps coming towards the door. Soon, the door opened and the skinny Bai Chiwen stood in front of me. After seeing me, Bai Chiwen's pupils slightly shrunk. Then, he gave me a fake smile and said, "So it's Taoist Zhou Yi from the Guangdong branch. What brings you here in the middle of the night?" His voice was the same as before, sharp and strange. After saying that, he craned his neck to look behind me. I knew that he wanted to see if the others from the Guangdong branch had arrived. I smirked and smiled at him. "You don't need to look. I'm the only one here. I'm not looking for you for anything else. I just saw that the Yunnan branch's Taoist friends have been very successful recently, so I came to congratulate you in advance." Bai Chiwen was stunned. Then, he asked, "May I know why you're congratulating me?" "You've stolen our Guangdong branch's spots. Logically speaking, after the Young Phoenix gathering, our Guangdong branch would definitely come looking for you and ask you for advice. But who would have thought that after you used such a shameless method to steal the spots to observe the true dragon vein, you actually injured our people. So, I've decided not to wait for the Young Phoenix gathering. I'll come looking for you now. You see, if I come looking for you after the gathering, I might take your life. But right now we're still in the headquarters of the Metaphysics Association, so I can't kill you. At most, I can only beat you up. Isn't this a happy occasion?" Bai Chiwen's face darkened and a trace of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. He sneered at me and said, "Taoist Zhou Yi, you're indeed someone who defeated the Qinling Han family's prodigy. You're really arrogant." After saying that, he leaned to the side and pointed at the door. "I wonder if Taoist Zhou Yi dares to come in and talk?" I didn't hesitate and walked into the room. After I entered the room, Bai Chiwen, who was behind me, followed closely behind me and closed the door. Everyone in the room clearly heard what I said. A short and fat man with skin almost as dark as Bai Chiwen stood up and roared at me with a hoarse and unpleasant voice. "Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? Now that you've entered this door, don't even think about leaving this place alive." The others also cheered and rushed over, surrounding me. I didn't say anything. Behind me, Bai Chiwen chuckled as he walked in front of me. "You geniuses are all the same. Your eyes are in the sky. I admit that you are definitely stronger than me, stronger than any of us here, but you actually look down on all of us. I really don't know if I should call you brave or stupid. His words stunned me. I didn't expect that after defeating Han Wanan, I would become a genius in other people's eyes. I shook my head. Brave or stupid? You'll know once you try. Don't talk too much nonsense, I'm in a hurry, you guys come at me together. After saying that, I secretly mobilized the Tao energy in my body and prepared to attack. A dark aura flashed across Bai Chiwen's face. It was obvious that my words had hurt his self-esteem. Just as the others were gearing up to attack me, Bai Chiwen raised his hand to stop them and said to me, I know you're strong, but I'm not King convinced. After saying that, he roared at the others, I want to test his strength first. When you see that I can't beat him, you can come at me together. His words opened my eyes. This guy wasn't a hypocrite at all. He was shameless and straightforward. Although the others were also angry, Bai Chiwen's prestige was good. After hearing what he said, the others could only stop. Bai Chiwen gazed at me for a few seconds. Then, he waved his hand. A wisp of Tao energy with a black aura attacked me. I knew that this guy didn't have any magic tools, but I didn't expect that he wouldn't even use a talisman and would directly use Tao energy to attack. These uncivilized barbarians really didn't care about rules. However, looking at the black Tao energy in his Tao energy, I guessed that he had held back when he had injured Su Shuxing. Otherwise, the poison in Su Shuxing's body wouldn't have been so light. I didn't dare to be careless, so I quickly took out a burning sun talisman. After receiving the Tao energy, I threw it at his black Tao energy. Based on his Tao energy, even if I hadn't absorbed the dark green energy, I wouldn't have been afraid of him. However, directly using Tao energy to fight him would consume too much Tao energy. I guessed that he wanted to consume my Tao energy, so I couldn't let him have his way. After the scorching sun talisman exploded in the air, it ignited a light green flame with a bang, completely blocking Bai Chiwen's poisonous qi of the way. Furthermore, with the terrifyingly high temperature, Bai Chiwen's qi of the way almost disappeared in an instant. As for the black poisonous qi of the way, under the roasting of the light green flame, it turned into a drop of thick black liquid. Even in such a high temperature, it did not vaporize and instead dripped onto the ground. When the black liquid fell to the ground, it made a sizzling sound as if it was corroding the ground. It was obvious how poisonous it was. After the collision, Bai Chiwen's Tao energy couldn't block the burning sun talisman at all. The light green flame continued to rush toward Bai Chiwen. Bai Chiwen's expression changed. He extended his hand and finally took out a talisman. After receiving the Tao energy, a cold wind blew toward the light green flame. This was a gathering talisman, the simplest and most effective way to deal with the burning sun talisman. Unfortunately, when the chilly wind blew on the pale green flame, it only caused the flame to sway a little. Not to mention extinguishing the flame, it didn't even make the flame fade a little. This time, Bai Chiwen couldn't stay calm. He quickly took out a few more gathering talismans and called for the others to help him. The people around him were already prepared. When they heard his call, they quickly took out their gathering talismans and used them on the light green flame. Bai Chiwen, on the other hand, was quite impressive. He had used 3 gathering talismans in a row. In addition to the 5 talismans used by the people around him, a total of 8 gathering talismans were used before the pale green flame was finally extinguished. Even though my Tao Qi was much stronger than everyone else's, there were 9 gathering talismans in total. In addition to Bai Chiwen's Tao Qi that contained black Qi at the beginning, even with so much power, he was barely able to neutralize my fierce Yang talisman. I had to admit that the dark green power was too terrifying. The small room was in chaos. When the light green flame finally disappeared, the members of the Yunnan Metaphysics branch heaved a sigh of relief. They looked at each other in dismay. In the end, their gazes landed on me. Everyone's faces were filled with bitterness. I smiled. You've tested my strength. Now, can we do it together? Bai Chiwen didn't say anything. It was obvious that he was struggling in his heart. But I have to admit that this despicable fellow still has some courage. Not long after, a ruthless look appeared on his face again, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Although the power of that talisman is strong, he must have consumed a lot of Dao Qi. There are 10 of us, how can we be scared by him alone?" He looked at the people around him, and took out a strange black talisman. He walked towards me and spat out 3 words, "Let's attack together." The others were also provoked. They took out all kinds of talismans and screamed as they pounced on me. After experiencing the terrifying power of the dark green energy, I was confident. I didn't need to use talismans anymore. I used the Dao energy in my body and gently pushed it toward the 10 people who were rushing toward me. With a faint green aura of the way, it formed a complete pillar of light in the air, blocking all of the talismans that the 10 of them had thrown out. The flames and chilly winds that the talismans had released were useless in front of this thick light pillar. It didn't take long before they were all scattered. Only Bai Chiwen's strange black talisman emitted a thick black mist that enveloped a small part of my Dao energy. But very quickly, a light green color appeared in the thick black fog. Then, my Taoist Qi suddenly expanded, directly dispersing the black fog. Chapter 125. After sending the 10 people of the Yunnan Metaphysics Association flying, there was still a lot of my Dao energy left. After circling in the air, it returned to my body and enveloped me before slowly entering my body. At this moment, Bai Chiwen and the others didn't have a bitter expression on their faces. They were filled with shock and bewilderment. Bai Chiwen, in particular, was coughing blood as he muttered, "How is this possible? Even Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun shouldn't be this strong. Why?" To be honest, not only was he shocked, but I was also shocked. This strange dark green power seemed to have a natural restraining effect on other people's Dao energy. It surprised me again and again. I couldn't believe it. After calming myself down, I looked at the people of the Yunnan branch, who were paralyzed on the ground. I shook my head and didn't say anything before I stood up and left. It was almost time for them to observe the true dragon's vein. I didn't hold back this time. My injuries were enough to affect their absorption of the dragon's vein qi. It was the price they had to pay for their actions. Of course, I didn't push things too far. After all, there were still a few days left for them. Whether or not they could recover from their injuries would depend on their luck. The commotion in the room wasn't small, but it was nothing compared to the noise they made when they gathered together. Moreover, Bai Chiwen had already closed the door, so the noise couldn't be transmitted outside. Thus, it didn't attract the attention of the Metaphysics Association. I left the room, and on the way back to my room, I bumped into Zhang Wenfei and the others. Besides Su Shuxing, the other 8 people of the Guangdong branch were rushing towards me. When we bumped into each other, we were surprised. I asked in astonishment, "What are you doing?" Zhang Wenfei was stunned, but he didn't stop. Instead, he hurriedly ran to my side and looked at my body. Then, he asked, "You're not injured?" "Why would I be injured? You didn't come back for a long time. I went out to look for you, but I couldn't find you. I thought you went to the Yunnan branch to find those bastards." Zhang Wenfei wiped his sweat. Perhaps it was because his injuries hadn't healed yet, but he couldn't help but cough a few times. Then, he rejoiced and said, "It seems that you didn't go. That's good, that's good." I smiled at him and said embarrassedly, "Actually, I just came back from the Yunnan branch." The group of people had just heaved a sigh of relief, but when they heard what I said, they opened their eyes wide. "Then why did you?" Before Zhang Wenfei could finish, I interrupted him with a chuckle. "I already told you that those people weren't my opponents. They were just a bunch of clowns. Apart from using poison and other crooked methods, the rest were not worth mentioning. If they were really that capable, they wouldn't be ranked in Zone Gui." The group of people looked at each other. Finally, they became excited and shouted, Zhou took care of them all by himself. Let's see if those bastards dare to jump around again in the future. Zhang Wenfei finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, unlike the excitement of the others, his face was still filled with worry. We stood on the spot and chatted for a while. Since it was getting late, we were worried that the people from the metaphysics headquarters would come, so we quickly returned to District D. After we returned to our respective rooms, Zhang Wenfei asked me worriedly, "Zhou, are the injuries of the people from the Yunnan branch serious?" I nodded and said, "I didn't hold back. Their injuries are at least more serious than Su Shuxing's. They should be similar to your injuries." Zhang Wenfei's eyes widened and he said anxiously, "Why don't you know the severity of the situation? Their injuries will definitely affect their ability to observe the true dragon vein. Aren't you afraid that they'll give up and report you to the headquarters?" Ever since the dark green energy had separated my body into 5 light pillars, I no longer felt that observing the true dragon's veins was dispensable. I really needed this chance now. However, I didn't care about what Zhang Wenfei said. I smiled and said, "Of course I'm afraid, but I need this opportunity. They also need it more than me. Moreover, there are still a few days left. People tend to have a fluke mentality. As long as there's hope, they'll hope that their injuries will be healed within these few days. They won't fight to the death with me. Moreover," the corner of my mouth curled into a cold smile, "would they still dare to seek their own deaths after witnessing my power? If something like that really happens, I don't mind giving them the most profound lesson." After hearing what I said, Zhang Wenfei was silent for a while. In the end, he nodded and didn't say anything. However, the worry on his face hadn't completely faded. After talking about this matter, I laid on my bed and went to sleep. In the past few days, I had been in a series of fierce battles. In addition, I had been studying the green energy at night. Although my body and spirit were much stronger than ordinary people, I still felt tired. I decided to have a good rest today. The next morning, not long after I woke up, someone knocked on my door. I thought it was Su Shuxing and the others who had come to ask about yesterday's matter, so I didn't pay much attention to it and went to open the door. In the end, standing outside the door was Director Song Xing, whom I had seen earlier. When I saw him, I couldn't help but frown. Why did he come to find me? Could it be that the people from the Yunnan branch had really chosen to fight to the death? At this time, Zhang Wenfei also saw Director Song Xing. His expression instantly changed, and he stood there, not knowing what to do. We didn't say anything, but Director Song Xing walked in with interest. After looking around, he asked, "Have you been living well these past few days?" I didn't know what he meant, so I nodded and said, "Of course. The environment here is quiet and the air is good. It's very comfortable to live here." Director Song Xing nodded and sat down on a chair by the table. Then, he threw an ancient folding fan towards me. I caught it and was immediately stunned. The color of the folding fan was ancient, but there was a dark yellow light flowing on the fan's ribs. Moreover, it contained a faint Tao energy. I could tell at a glance that it was a magic tool. Why did he throw such a magic tool to me? As if he had seen through my doubts, Director Song Xing said with a smile, "Do you still remember the geomancy diagram of the Yin house that transformed from a turtle and a snake during the dragon seizing tournament?" Of course I remember. As I nodded, I became even more doubtful. What did this have to do with the geomancy diagram of the Yin house? Director Song Xing chuckled and continued, "At that time, someone should have told you that it was a question that our Metaphysics Society's old president Li had specially set up. He didn't expect anyone to be able to answer it, but he didn't think that you would be able to answer it. Moreover, you're from old President Li's hometown branch. After knowing about this, the old president felt that you were fated, so he specially asked me to give you this folding fan magic tool that he had used in his early years." After saying that, he pointed at the folding fan in my hand and said, "This fan is called the Square Heavenly Fan. It's a defensive magic tool. After careful nurturing, it will have a great defensive power. Moreover, according to the old president, this fan has other mystical abilities that you will have to explore on your own. After hearing what he said, I immediately heaved a sigh of relief, and at the same time, my heart was filled with joy. I didn't think that I would have such a fortuitous encounter after becoming the champion of the dragon seizing tournament. Defensive magic tools were actually quite rare. When two magic tools of the same grade were compared, the offensive magic tool would definitely not be able to break the defensive magic tool. This was common sense. In addition, the number of defensive magic tools was quite small, so it was even more precious. During the battle with Han Wennan, when he didn't take out the Celestial Master magic tool, he had blocked the yin-yang fish that I had drawn out with the Yama pen for the first time. Apart from using hand seals, when the yin-yang fish exploded, he must have used some kind of defensive magic tool to remain unscathed under my all-out attack. It's just that I didn't see it in the blink of an eye. Moreover, the defensive magic tool was a life-saving means. At that time, I didn't see it clearly. It must have been done deliberately by Han Wennan. Naturally, the fewer people who knew about the life-saving means, the better. Holding this ancient and simple square heavenly fan, the more I looked at it, the happier I felt. At that moment, Director Song Xing spoke again. This time, he wasn't talking to me but to Zhang Wenfei. "Little friend, can you go out for a while? I still have some things that I need to talk to Zhou Yi alone." Zhang Wenfei and I were stunned. We had just turned from worry to joy, but now we couldn't help but worry. What is it that he wants to talk to me alone? Chapter 126. Zhang Wenfei frowned as he looked at Director Song Xing. After staying silent for a while, he helplessly walked out of the room. Although I was a little worried, I didn't show it on my face. After Zhang Wenfei left, I sat down on the bed and asked with a smile, "Director Song, what's the matter? Just say it." Director Song Xing smiled and looked at me. "The second matter is also a happy one. It's about the Dragon Vein ranking." His words were completely out of my expectations. Could it be that there were some changes to the ranking? Looking at his smiling face, I was happy and quickly asked, "Is it to restore our Guangdong branch's ranking?" Director Song Xing was stunned and quickly shook his head. "The ranking has already been decided. How can it be restored? I know that the other branches didn't do what they did during the ranking competition, but they didn't break the rules, so we can't interfere. However, after some research, your Guangdong branch suffered a huge loss, so we thought of a way to compensate you." I knew that it was impossible to restore our ranking, but I was also interested in the compensation, so I quickly asked him what it was. Director Song Xing looked at me and the smile on his face faded. "What the headquarters means is that we can arrange for you to follow the people from the other branches to observe the true dragon veins tomorrow or the day after." Tomorrow or the day after. That's great, it's a lot higher than our previous ranking. But after he said that, he stopped talking. I asked him curiously, "What about the others? Come with me?" Director Song Xing shook his head. "It's still acceptable to arrange for you to join, but if we arrange for the other branches will definitely be unhappy. So, the others will go according to the original order. Only you can go in advance." His words stunned me for a long time, then I smiled wryly. He said that it was compensation for our Guangdong branch, but in reality, how was that compensation? It was obviously because I had the talent to fight against Han Wennan, so he specially arranged for me. Just like how Bai Chiwen called me a genius yesterday, I was probably a rare genius in the eyes of the Metaphysics Society. I had the potential to be nurtured, which was why Director Song Xing specifically came to tell me about it. If I hadn't displayed this potential, I'm afraid no one would have come to me to talk about compensation. To tell the truth, I want to go, because the 5 pillars of Tao Qi in my body are divided, and my level is far from being able to draw Qi like a pillar. I need a large amount of dragon vein chi to make up for what I need. If this drags on until the last day, who knows how much dragon vein chi is left in the true dragon vein for me to absorb. At that time, it will definitely have a great impact on me. However, could I accept it with a clear conscience? How would I face Zhang Wenfei then? How could he face the injured Su Shuxing? And those who, because of my wrong decisions, caused them to fall from the 8th place to the last in the metaphysics branch? But on second thought, such an excellent opportunity was right in front of me. If I didn't cherish it, wouldn't I be letting myself down? The expression on my face showed that I was struggling. After being silent for a long time, I finally sighed. With a calm expression, I said to Director Song Xing, "Director Song, I know that the headquarters has good intentions, but I am responsible for the fact that our Guangdong branch's ranking has fallen to the last place. I really can't abandon them and go and observe the true dragon's veins in advance. I still hope that the headquarters can do some research and raise the overall ranking of our branch." The smile on Director Song Xing's face finally disappeared, and he asked me with uncertainty, "Do you want to think about it?" This time, I didn't hesitate at all and replied resolutely, "I've already thought about it. Unless the people from the Guangdong branch can go with me." Director Song Xing stood up from his chair and said regretfully, "You have great talent, but you have a lowly background. At this age, your strength isn't inferior to the direct descendant of the Qinling Han family. You will definitely have great achievements in the future. I've also seen your companions. To be honest, their talents are far inferior to yours. From the looks of it now, you're loyal, advancing and retreating with them, but in the long run, you're only delaying yourself. You should think about it this way. In the future, when your strength reaches Shuyao, or even the heavenly Shu realm, then you can help repay them. Their loss now, compared to the benefits they will receive in the future, which is more important." I couldn't help but admit that the example he gave was very reasonable, but I received a good family education since I was young, and after I grew up, I also received the influence of higher education. I deeply understood that value couldn't be compared like that. I shook my head at Director Song Xing. "According to what you said, they might receive more benefits, but that's something that hasn't happened yet, so anything is possible, right?" Seeing my determined expression, Director Song Xing finally sighed and turned to leave. However, before he left, he told me that if I changed my mind, I could find him any time in the next few days. He could also arrange a place for me in one of the higher-ranked branches. After he left, Zhang Wenfei immediately ran back and asked me anxiously, "What's going on?" I knew that if I told him, the people in the branch would advise me to think for myself. So I didn't say anything. I just smiled and told him, "It's about Han Wenan, and it's not convenient to tell outsiders." When Zhang Wenfei heard that it wasn't about the Yunnan branch, he heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't care about it anymore. Instead, he curiously looked at the square sky fan in my hand and showed it to him. I also put the previous matter behind me and started to study the defensive magic tool with him. The square sky fan wasn't big. Even when it was opened, it was only slightly bigger than 2 palms. Moreover, it didn't look eye-catching. The light flowing on it was dark yellow, the same color as the fan itself. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to notice it. The design on the fan was even more unsightly. There was only a crooked little mound drawn on the fan, and a few twisted weeds were faintly outlined on the side. It looked like a desolate and lonely grave. On the back of the fan there was a couplet, "Rumbling sounds are faintly found, and the twists and turns are reborn." After looking at it for a long time, I couldn't see anything strange about the picture and the words. Zhang Wenfei was a little impatient. "Hurry and take in the Dao Qi to see the power of this magic tool." I didn't try to avoid it. I directly guided the magic tool in my body to the center of the fan. Then, the earth-yellow fan flashed and disappeared. Then, a lonely grave appeared in front of me, along with the twisted weeds around it. I was startled. Generally speaking, magic tools couldn't transform. For example, Han Wennan and Yang Shilong's magic tools, which could change their appearance, were already extraordinary. Han Wennan's leaf was a heavenly master's magic tool. However, this extremely mediocre-looking square sky fan was actually able to transform into a lone grave out of nowhere. It was unbelievable. The two of us stared at each other in confusion for a long time. Finally, Zhang Wenfei reacted first and said, "I've heard from Master that there is a special kind of magic tool that can absorb a real world into the magic tool and act as the spirit of the magic tool. Could this square sky fan be that kind of magic tool?" I had never heard of such a thing before. "Zhang Wenfei, please explain it to me." However, he had only heard his master mention it once. He didn't know much, so he couldn't explain it. After discussing for a while, I stopped studying the magic tool's properties and started to study its power. The results surprised me. This thing was just as Zhang Wenfei had said. It could take in a real world and use it as a magic tool. The lonely grave looked strange, but Zhang Wenfei didn't use his Dao Qi at all. He just walked from the middle of the grave to me. What kind of defense is this? It's the same as not having it, right? After that, no matter how I urged my Dao Qi, the result didn't change. The small soil mound still looked lifeless. In the end, Zhang Wenfei comforted me. This magic tool has a spirit. It needs to be carefully nurtured to fully display its defensive power. I had no choice but to believe him. I put the square sky fan away and used my Dao Qi to slowly nurture it. I would see if there were any changes in the future. After that, I spent the next few days slowly absorbing the power of the dark green bead to nourish the square sky fan. As for the Yunnan branch, it was just as I had predicted. In the end, they didn't choose to fight to the death. Instead, they obediently went to study the true dragon's vein. After that, I didn't see them again. Chapter 127. Although we were resentful that we were ranked last, when the day came, the 10 members of the branch had already forgotten about the previous discord. Instead, they were filled with anxiety and longing for the day. None of us could sleep the night before. Everyone knew that this trip was related to whether or not they could advance from the dragon drawing realm to the pressure point realm. The difference between these two realms was a watershed. A feng shui master who had undergone the baptism of dragon energy would have a great improvement in their physique. They could even prolong their lifespan. This was a great attraction to anyone. If they didn't successfully convert enough dragon energy this time and couldn't reach the pressure point realm, they would never have another chance in their lives. The Metaphysics Society wouldn't allow a feng shui master to observe the true dragon's vein a second time. Finding a true dragon's vein was even more wishful thinking. According to the previous results, the Guangdong branch had always been at the forefront of the other branches. On average, 7 or 8 people could smoothly reach the Qi drawing pillar level and enter the pressure point realm. It was just that this time they were ranked last, and no one dared to have 100% confidence. Even I didn't know what the final result would be. After all, I had 5 pillars of energy and only one of them had reached the Qi drawing pillar level. If I wanted to make up for the other 4, it would be difficult to be the first to observe the true dragon's vein, not to mention being ranked last. However, worrying about it wouldn't help. When we set off the next day, I had already calmed down. In any case, I could only do my best and leave it to fate. I could only take one step at a time. After all, the energy I had absorbed from the Mount Tai stone had helped me reach the Qi drawing pillar level. Even if I couldn't do it this time, there might be other opportunities in the future. Since we were the last to set off, Director Song Xing and the others from the Metaphysics Society also went with us. After asking, I learned that they would wait for us to observe the true dragon's vein and then return to the Metaphysics Society with us. The true dragon's vein was near our manor. After driving for half an hour, they dropped us off. When we got out of the car, full of hope, we didn't see the true dragon's vein. We only saw a lush forest. At this moment, Director Song Xing got out of the car. He looked at the forest in front of us and told us, "This is just the periphery of the true dragon's vein. Around 10 kilometers away from here is the true dragon's vein. There are no more roads for vehicles in front, so you can only walk on your own from now on." Thinking about it, it made sense. Since the true dragon vein was so hidden, it definitely would not have built a path there. Moreover, I know that although true dragon veins are hard to find and feng shui masters have almost no chance to find them, they can only rely on the true dragon veins found by their predecessors to increase their realms. However, the process of finding true dragon veins is also a form of cultivation. It is very useful for learning feng shui knowledge and increasing one's cultivation realm. Furthermore, the true dragon vein wasn't the only place that contained the dragon vein qi. It included the ancestral dragon, the embryonic breath dragon vein, and the dragon veins that extended out. Only by studying the entire true dragon vein and gaining a complete understanding of the true dragon vein would they be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort when studying the true dragon vein. Their efficiency in absorbing the dragon vein qi would be at least 50% higher than others. The Metaphysics Society's arrangement definitely had this layer of meaning. However, Director Song Xing didn't say much to us and just brought us along a muddy road into the forest. As soon as we stepped on the road, I started to look around and quickly found the location of the dragon vein. Moreover, the dragon vein was far behind us. Following the direction of the dragon vein, we easily found the embryonic breath dragon vein, not far from us. After finding the embryonic breath dragon vein, I was reassured. As long as we followed the embryonic breath dragon vein, the traces of the true dragon vein wouldn't disappear. I didn't continue to look behind us, but turned to look at my companions from the Guangdong branch. Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing were the same as me. Their gazes were on the dragon vein in the distance, but they hadn't found the location of the embryonic breath dragon vein yet, so they were studying it as they walked. Among the others, only 3 of them were looking around. As for the rest, they were focused on hurrying on their journey and didn't seem to have any awareness in this aspect. I hastily explained to everyone the significance of observing the entire dragon's vein. When the others heard that absorbing the dragon's vein could actually increase the efficiency by 50%, they paid more attention to it. They carefully observed the dragon's vein and embryonic breath dragon's vein, according to what I had told them. During the process of searching for the dragon vein, although it was best to find it yourself, the dragon vein and the embryonic breath dragon vein were still at the initial stage. Even if someone reminded them, the effect wouldn't be too different. After I finished speaking, Zhang Wenfei quickly echoed, "I also just found a trace of the aura of the embryonic breath dragon vein and confirmed the direction of the entire dragon vein. I was about to remind everyone, but I didn't expect you to find it faster than me, Zhou Yi." After he said that, Director Song Xing, who was leading us forward, also said emotionally, "Yeah, I've brought many people through this path over the years, but there are only a few people who have found the embryonic breath dragon vein so quickly. Moreover, Zhou Yi has already reminded us, so we must have found it earlier. I've never seen such speed in my life." His praise made me feel a little embarrassed. It wasn't that I was fast in finding it, but that I had already seen the embryonic breath dragon vein outside the Fire God Temple. At that time, I had spent a few days to confirm the location of the embryonic breath dragon vein. Now, with my previous experience, I was naturally able to find some clues immediately. As for the others, they might only have this chance to see the embryonic breath dragon vein once in their lives, so their speed naturally couldn't be compared to mine. At that moment, Director Song Xing said, "I originally thought that since your Guangdong branch was ranked last, the number of people who could participate in the Young Phoenix gathering would definitely be greatly affected. but now it seems that everything is hard to say. I've seen the statistics from the headquarters this year. About less than half of the people from the other branches can start to observe the first third of the road. Beyond this range, the embryonic breath dragon vein won't be able to be seen. Even if the people from the metaphysics headquarters remind you at that time, if you miss the first opportunity, you won't be able to compare to the others. We, feng shui masters, pay attention to opportunities. This road is also a test of the metaphysics society. You can only rely on yourself to comprehend it. After he said that, the other members of the branch looked at me with gratitude in their eyes. Although Director Song Xing didn't say it explicitly, it was obvious that he was praising me for sharing this information with others, so the others naturally understood. For the rest of the journey, no one spoke. Everyone focused their attention on studying the entire true dragon vein. Back then, at the Fire God Temple, I discovered the ancestral dragon after the embryonic breath dragon vein, and then entered the range of the Fire God Temple. In reality, the embryonic breath dragon vein and the ancestral dragon were not the only things that the true dragon vein extended from. According to the death scripture, the terrains that extended from the true dragon vein were ancestral dragon embryonic breath, branch vein chi, opening the tent and entering the head, and bright dragon robe. There were a total of 4 major terrains and 8 minor ones. The embryonic breath dragon vein and the ancestral dragon were only the first major landforms. Afterward, I walked from the branch to the pulse, from the tent to the entrance. After walking for 10 kilometers, I finally found Mingtang. The term Bright Hall originally referred to the court where hundreds of officials paid homage to the monarch when he was listening to politics in ancient times. Later, it was extended to feng shui. The entrance of the house of the living or the place in front of the tomb of the dead were all called Bright Hall. Correspondingly, the world outside the true dragon vein was also known as the Bright Hall. There was a saying in feng shui, enter the mountain to find the entrance of the water, climb the cave to see the Bright Hall. Not only could one find the tomb through the Bright Hall when visiting the tomb of the dead, but one could also find the location of the true dragon vein through the Bright Hall when searching for the true dragon vein. After passing through the Bright Hall, a small hill appeared in front of us. After the Bright Hall, it was naturally the dragon robe. What was the dragon robe? The land that covered the true dragon vein was called the dragon robe. In other words, the true dragon vein was inside the small hill. Seeing the hill, Zhang Wenfei subconsciously blurted out, "This is the dragon robe? Why is it so short?" Director Song Xing looked at the small hill in front of him, his eyes filled with endless infatuation and deep thought. There was even a trace of melancholy. After letting out a breath, he said, "Don't say that there is a dragon in the high mountains, but it is lost on the flat ground. This is the dragon robe. Everyone, follow me into the cave." After saying that, he pointed at the cave on the mountain wall in front of him and took the lead to walk inside. Chapter 128. Don't say that there's a dragon in the high mountains, but it's lost on the flat ground. These 2 lines were from the Tang dynasty's feng shui master, Yang Yunsong's shocking dragon scripture. It meant that a true dragon didn't necessarily live in the high mountains. It could appear on the flat ground. Originally, it was meant to explain the feng shui of the plain. However, it was suitable for this small hill in front of us. After Director Song Xing entered the cave, we hurried to follow him into the cave. At first, I thought that the Metaphysics Society would send a lot of people to guard the true dragon's vein. However, no one came out of the cave. It was strange. From the moment we had arrived until now, only Director Song Xing had been leading the team. The true dragon's vein, which was very important to the Metaphysics Society, didn't look like anyone was guarding it. Was it because they were worried that people would suspect something? That's why they had set up such a strict guard method? I thought about it. I didn't think it was like that. After all, there was a big manor not far from here. Even if they wanted to hide it, they wouldn't be able to do so. Most likely, there were some hidden mechanisms nearby that I couldn't see. The people in charge of guarding the true dragon's vein should be hiding in those places. At first, there was nothing strange about the cave. It was dark and narrow. After we entered the cave, Director Song Xing held 2 torches in his hands. He gave one to me and led the way. I held the torch and followed Director Song Xing. At the same time, I carefully observed the mountain walls around us. Although I could feel the thick aura of the dragon's vein, the mountain walls around us were bare. I didn't see anything strange. After walking for almost half an hour, the mountain walls twisted and turned. Under the interference of the thick aura of the dragon's vein, I had lost my sense of direction. However, right at this moment, a light moved in front of us. Even under the light of the torches, it still shone brightly in front of us. Director Song Xing suddenly stopped in his tracks. "We've arrived?" The crowd, who had been silent all along the way, suddenly raised their heads and looked at Director Song Xing, who was walking at the front with burning eyes. Everyone's heart was beating like a drum. I opened my mouth and wanted to ask, but I couldn't make a sound. All of a sudden, Director Song Xing threw the torch in his hand to the ground. He gently stepped on the torch to extinguish it. Then, he turned to me and asked me to extinguish the torch as well. After I extinguished the torch, the surroundings didn't turn dark. Instead, there was a faint layer of light. This kind of light was like fluorescent light. It could barely illuminate the path ahead. However, when I lifted my head to look ahead, I saw a stone wall that looked like a full moon. Director Song Xing didn't say anything. He just led us to walk in that direction. As we got closer, the brilliance of the stone wall became even brighter, illuminating our surroundings. When we were only a few meters away from the stone wall, I discovered that there was a small crack in the rock beside the stone wall. The light on the stone wall did not come from the stone wall itself. Instead, it came from the crack in the rock. Moreover, every once in a while, an unusually bright brilliance would burst out from that crack, and then slowly dim. Earlier, when we were holding the torches, the bright light came from here. After taking a few more steps forward, Director Song Xing walked to the crack and stopped. He turned to me and said, "Zhou-yi, take them in from here. Inside is the true dragon vein. You have a whole day. At midnight, I will call you out here." I was stunned. "Director Song Xing, you're not going in?" Song Xing looked at me with envy in his eyes. After a few seconds of silence, he shook his head and smiled wryly. "The people of the Metaphysics Society only have one chance to enter. I can't go in. I can only stay here to protect you." The true dragon vein's biggest function was to replenish one's Tao energy. In fact, even after reaching the acupuncture point realm, the true dragon vein was still very useful to feng shui masters. Even feng shui masters at the Heaven Master realm desired the true dragon vein. That was why Song Xing looked envious. However, the entire Metaphysics Society relied on the true dragon vein. After all these years, the true dragon vein's burden must have been very heavy. Otherwise, the Metaphysics Society wouldn't only open it once every 3 years. It was probably because of this reason that the Metaphysics Society strictly restricted others from absorbing the dragon vein's qi. Only feng shui masters at the dragon-seeking realm were allowed to use it. I nodded at Song Xing. Then, I turned to look at the others. I took a deep breath and said, "Follow me. Let's go in." Then, I took the lead and stepped into the crack in the rock. As soon as I entered, a bright light shone at me. I couldn't help but squint my eyes. After the light disappeared, I saw that the situation in front of me was completely different from the cave outside. It was an extremely spacious mountain belly. It looked like a huge mountain that had been hollowed out. From the small hill outside, I couldn't tell that there was such a world inside. And in the middle of this huge mountain, there was a dragon lying on the ground. That's right, it was a dragon. Its entire body emitted a bright white light that was much brighter than the moonlight of a full moon. Every once in a while, the two huge eyes on the dragon's head would open and close. The light that shone on our bodies outside the crack was the light of the dragon's eyes. Seeing this scene, everyone who came in was stunned on the spot, almost unable to believe their eyes. After a long while, I woke up from my absent-mindedness and walked towards the crouching giant dragon. When I got closer, I could see that it wasn't a living dragon. It was more like a huge stone dragon sculpture. However, the stone dragon sculpture was covered with a thick layer of white light. I couldn't see what the dragon's body was. I could only feel that it was made of stone. As for the thick layer of light outside, it was the endless dragon vein energy. Dragon vein energy was colorless and formless, just like air. However, the dragon vein energy here actually formed such a bright white light. It showed how thick it was. Moreover, this was the true dragon vein that had already been absorbed by dozens of people from the metaphysics branch. It was hard to imagine what the true dragon formed by the pure dragon vein chi looked like when Han Wennan and the others first came in. As expected of the true dragon vein, the most mysterious place was the dragon's mouth at the front of the dragon's vein. There was a small ball of milky white liquid floating in the air. It was at least 10 meters away from us, but we didn't know what it was. At this moment I had calmed down. I wasn't mesmerized by the true dragon vein in front of me anymore. I called for the others and arranged for them to sit down. I told them to quickly absorb the dragon vein energy. We only had 1 day, or rather, half a day. It was already noon and the night was about to end. Everyone's dreams, whether they would come true or wither, would be decided by this half a day. No one dared to waste time. After sitting down around the true dragon vein, everyone held their breaths and started to absorb the dragon vein energy. I did the same. After sitting down below the dragon's neck, I slowly adjusted my breathing. After my breathing stabilized, I started to move the Tao Qi in my body to gather at the first pillar of Tao Qi. Then, I started to absorb the extremely thick dragon vein energy around me. The extremely pure dragon vein energy was quickly absorbed into my body. In an instant, it was turned into extremely thick Tao Qi. No wonder Han Wennan and the others still wanted to come here even though their Qi of the Way had already reached the Qi gathering pillar realm. The pure Qi of the dragon vein here was definitely much richer and purer than the Qi of the Way that I had converted from the Qi of the dragon vein on the stone of Mount Tai. Needless to say, its power was definitely much greater. They probably wanted to turn the Tao Qi in their bodies into the purest power. As I absorbed, my body and mind completely calmed down. I was immersed in an extremely mysterious realm. The Tao Qi in my body was rapidly increasing. However, at this moment, the jade bracelet that was hanging on my chest suddenly broke free from my clothes. After it slowly floated into the air, it suddenly charged towards the true dragon vein like a wild horse. Its strength was so great that it even broke the rope that was hanging on my neck. Instantly, I woke up from that mysterious state. I looked at the jade bracelet in shock as it charged towards the true dragon vein. Then, it stuck to it and didn't move. At the same time, the thick dragon vein energy on the true dragon vein crazily surged towards the jade bracelet. The jade bracelet was actually absorbing the dragon vein energy. Instantly, I thought back to when I was at the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association. When I faced the Mount Tai stone, the jade bracelet also crazily absorbed all the dragon vein energy on it. Looking at its crazed expression, could it be that this time, it wanted to absorb all the dragon vein energy from the true dragon vein? Chapter 129. With the experience from the Mount Tai stone, I had thought that the jade bracelet could absorb the energy of the dragon vein. However, before I saw it, I didn't believe that the jade bracelet could absorb the entire true dragon vein. It was a true dragon vein. What was the jade bracelet? The jade bracelet was just a toy that Red Shadow had used to possess. Compared to the true dragon vein, it was just like an ant. It was like an ant trying to swallow an elephant. I sat there and watched the aura of the true dragon vein become weaker and weaker while the dragon energy of the jade bracelet became stronger. I became more and more anxious. The entire Metaphysics Association only has one true dragon vein. This is different from the stone of Mount Tai. The dragon chi on the stone of Mount Tai can only be used by me to raise my cultivation, but the true dragon vein can be used by the entire Metaphysics Association. It was the foundation of the Metaphysics Society for 100 years. If the jade bracelet absorbed the entire true dragon vein, wouldn't the Metaphysics Society go crazy? With my current power, I guess there wouldn't be anything left of me if I faced the crazed members of the Metaphysics Society. Although I was greedy, I didn't dare to be greedy. I didn't care about anything else and hurried to pull the jade bracelet down. After absorbing so much dragon vein energy, my strength wasn't small. However, the jade bracelet was the same as when it was attached to the Mount Tai stone. No matter how hard I pulled, the jade bracelet didn't budge. It was as if it had been welded to the stone. What should I do? I was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. I stood up and spun around on the spot. I used my hands to pull, my feet to kick, and my teeth to bite. However, it didn't work. The only good thing was that the other members of the branch were sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed. They were completely immersed in absorbing the energy of the dragon vein. No one noticed my situation. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Then, I started to think of a solution. The jade bracelet was Red Shadow's possession. Now, Tong Tong was inside it. If that was the case, could Tong Tong control it? My eyes brightened. I hurried to call Tong Tong in my mind. However, no matter how hard I called, Tong Tong didn't respond. He had completely lost contact with me. After all, with the Mount Tai stone as a precedent, I wasn't worried about Tong Tong. The surging dragon energy had cut off his connection with the outside world. However, I couldn't contact Tong Tong. What else could I do to stop this crazy jade bracelet? I dejectedly sat on the ground. At this moment, the dragon energy in the jade bracelet had already reached a terrifying level. As for the true dragon vein, there was only a thin layer of dragon energy left. At least half of the dragon energy had been absorbed by the jade bracelet. Even if she could contact Tong Tong now, it would be too late. As long as the people from the Metaphysics Association weren't stupid, they would be able to tell that there was a problem with the true dragon vein. I didn't think about how to stop the jade bracelet. Instead, I started to think about how to fix it. However, my mind was in a mess. I couldn't think about how to stop Tong Tong bracelet. At this moment, the last trace of dragon chi on the true dragon vein was finally absorbed by Yu Huan. The true dragon vein was still wrapped in a layer of dim fluorescent light. However, it was no longer the fluorescent light of the true dragon vein itself, but the light of the jade bracelet. Hua! Tong Tong had the dragon from the bracelet. Light bracelet, after, absorbed the light and the jade light the dragon, the jade had absorbed the statue. Moreover, since the jade bracelet was still attached to the statue, its light also covered the entire statue. However, the dragon head where the jade bracelet was glowing brightly, while the dragon tail was far away. It was so dim that only the statue was left. The surging dragon energy from the jade bracelet was still diffusing. Zhang Wenfei and the others were still immersed in that mysterious atmosphere. They hadn't woken up yet. As it had come to this, I had no choice but to take one step at a time. As the jade bracelet had absorbed all the dragon energy, it could be taken off the statue. However, I didn't dare to do so. Once the jade bracelet was taken off, Zhang Wenfei and the others would wake up. At that time, I wouldn't be able to explain anything to them. During this period of time, although I got along well with the 9 of them, the implications of this matter were too great. I didn't dare to place my safety entirely on their kindness. I closed my eyes again, and tried to absorb the dragon chi from the jade bracelet. Immediately, I found the same feeling as before. The surging and pure dragon chi crazily surged towards me. Almost in an instant, a large amount of dragon chi turned into Dao Chi, filling up half of the second Dao Chi light pillar in my body. This speed was at least 10 times faster than when I absorbed the dragon chi from the true dragon vein. However, since the entire true dragon tie was in the jade bracelet, I wasn't in a hurry to absorb it. After trying for a while, I stopped and stood up to check on Zhang Wenfei and the others. At this time, Zhang Wenfei's Dao energy wasn't far from the Qi guiding pillar. As for the others, except for Su Shuxing, who could barely reach the halfway mark, the others were only a little bit stronger than the Qi guiding finger. I roughly calculated the time. We had already been here for 4 to 5 hours. According to their speed, only Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing would be able to reach the Qi guiding pillar by the time it was midnight. The others wouldn't be able to succeed. After thinking about it, I walked towards a branch member named He Bo, who was relatively close to me. After walking to his side, I sat down cross-legged and placed my hand on his body. Don't open your eyes. Focus and calm your mind. He Bo's body shivered. It was obvious that he had heard my voice. However, he quickly followed my instructions and calmed down, continuing to absorb the dragon energy. Seeing that he was ready, I slowly started to move the dragon energy in the jade bracelet towards He Bo's body. Through the jade bracelet, the speed at which I absorbed the dragon energy was at least 10 times faster than when I had absorbed it from the true dragon tie. Compared to He Bo's speed, it was like heaven and earth. He Bo's body shivered again. His face showed a hint of happiness, but he tried his best to suppress it. Very quickly, he calmed down and greedily absorbed the dragon energy. In just half an hour, the dragon energy in He Bo's body had accumulated enough for him to reach the Qi guiding pillar level. Only then did I release my hand and stand up. He Bo still didn't move. The dragon energy in his body couldn't be stored for a long time. Next, he had to quickly convert the dragon energy into Dao energy. Immediately after, I went to the second person to help him absorb the dragon energy. After 4 hours, I had helped the others absorb enough dragon energy. Only Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing were left. At this time, Zhang Wenfei had already absorbed enough dragon energy with his own power. He didn't need my help at all. Su Shuxing, on the other hand, had encountered some difficulties. He was still quite a distance away from reaching the Qi guiding pillar level. I walked to his side and repeated the same process. After I had helped him absorb enough dragon energy, I stopped and returned to my original position to sit down. After waiting for another 5 minutes, He Bo, who had accepted my help first, opened his eyes almost at the same time as Zhang Wenfei. Both of their faces were filled with joy as they jumped up from the ground. After looking at each other, He Bo turned to look at me and said, "Zhou Yi, no words can express my gratitude for your kindness. If you have any problems in the future, just look for me. I will definitely help you if I can." Zhang Wenfei, who hadn't seen the previous scene, obviously didn't know what had happened. He looked at He Bo in astonishment. After He Bo explained to him, he laughed and asked me how the others were doing. After knowing that I had helped everyone absorb the dragon energy, Zhang Wenfei heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he didn't say anything, I knew that he had been feeling guilty because of the true dragon vein's ranking. He felt that he had delayed the others' future. It was only now that he felt relieved. At this moment the others woke up. Just as we were about to walk over to ask about the situation, He Bo saw the situation of the true dragon vein. His expression instantly changed and he asked, "What happened to the true dragon vein? How did it become like this?" After he said that, Zhang Wenfei and the rest also looked at the true dragon vein. Their faces were filled with astonishment. Of course, I couldn't tell them, so I just stood at the side and didn't say a word. As they discussed, they moved towards the dragon's tail where the light was the dimmest. They wanted to see what had happened. During this process, the others gradually woke up. Before they could thank me, they were attracted by the abnormality of the true dragon vein. After everyone had woken up, I returned to my original position. I looked at the small jade bracelet that was emitting a strong light. I pondered for a long time before I clenched my teeth and took the jade bracelet from the true dragon vein while the others weren't paying attention. I quickly put it in my pocket. Chapter 130. It was just as I had imagined. After absorbing the true dragon vein, the jade bracelet didn't have that crazy suction force anymore. I took it off easily. However, the moment the jade bracelet left the true dragon vein, the light from the dragon statue suddenly disappeared. After I put the jade bracelet in my pocket, the entire stone room became gloomy. At this moment, I didn't care about that because the jade bracelet was filled with thick dragon energy, and it was shining brightly. I couldn't hide it from others. Thus, when I took the jade bracelet back, I had already thought of a solution. Although the chi of the dragon vein is slightly different from the chi of the way, they come from the same source. The energy I absorbed from the dark green bead a few days ago could perfectly conceal the chi of the way in my body, so it must be able to conceal the chi of the dragon vein as well. Thus, after I took the jade bracelet back, I immediately put it next to the dark green bead. Then, I tried my best to use the dark green energy in my body and the energy I had absorbed from the dark green bead to cover the jade bracelet. Perhaps it was because the dark green energy in my body wasn't enough. When I held the jade bracelet, the energy that I had used wasn't enough to cover the light. However, when I put the jade bracelet next to the dark green bead, before I could guide it, the dark green bead suddenly released a huge amount of energy and surged into the jade bracelet. Right after that, the jade bracelet's light disappeared, along with the dragon energy. Its color became dark green, which didn't look eye-catching at all. I heaved a sigh of relief, feeling much more at ease. However, Zhang Wenfei and the others were in an uproar. Everyone was panicking and discussing. While they were talking, they gathered around me. There was still a dim light in the dark. After the true dragon vein disappeared, the stone dragon didn't have the dragon energy's light anymore. However, the stone dragon had been nourished by the dragon energy all year round, so it still had a faint light to illuminate the surroundings. The change in the light in the stone room was transmitted to the outside. Before Zhang Wenfei and the others could come to my side, Director Song Xing's voice came from the crack in the rock. He had always been calm, but now his voice was similar to Zhang Wenfei and the others. He was panic-stricken and shouted at us, "What happened? What happened? What happened to the true dragon vein?" No one answered his question. Zhang Wenfei and the others also shut their mouths, not daring to say a word. Song Xing hurriedly ran in front of us and looked at the barren stone dragon in disbelief. He muttered, "How could this be? How was this possible? The true dragon vein dissipated?" After he said that, he suddenly turned his head and glared at all of us. After a moment of silence, he asked gloomily, "What happened here? Why would the true dragon vein disappear? Joey, you go first." I calmly told him what had happened. Except for the fact that Yu Huan had absorbed the true dragon's vein, I didn't conceal anything else. After Song Xing listened to me, he didn't say anything. He turned around and asked Zhang Wenfei, who was standing next to me, to tell me what he had encountered after he had entered this place. As Zhang Wenfei was explaining, footsteps could be heard coming from the entrance of the rock wall. A group of people seemed to be walking in this direction. Director Song Xing turned his head abruptly and shouted, "Why are there no rules at all? Is this a place you can enter? Get out." But the true dragon vein. The people that came in hurriedly tried to explain, but Song Xing didn't bother with them. He shouted again, "Get out." Those people finally stopped in their tracks. After a moment of silence, they retreated. Song Xing then turned his head. His face was still gloomy as he asked Zhang Wenfei to continue. It could be seen that Director Song Xing had a lot of authority in the Metaphysics Union. At least in the True Dragon vein, only President Gu had appeared once. The rest of the time, he was the person in charge. At this moment, those people that had rushed in were definitely the ones that were secretly guarding the True Dragon vein. However, they retreated after a single sentence from him. After Zhang Wenfei finished, Song Xing didn't change his expression and continued to let the next person speak. During the entire process, I was quietly listening. At the same time, I was glad that I had been careful and didn't let anyone find any clues. Otherwise, they might have sold me out. I really didn't dare to think about it. After everyone had finished speaking, Song Xing turned his head to look at the dim stone dragon. After a long while, he turned around and spat out 2 words. "Get out." All of us exchanged glances before we hurriedly left the stone room through the crack in the rock. As soon as we got out, we met several middle-aged men in ordinary clothes. They were standing there with anxious faces. As soon as they saw us, they asked in unison, "What happened in there? Why is the True Dragon vein no longer emitting light?" Before we could answer, Song Xing's voice resounded from behind. He wasn't talking to us, but to the middle-aged men. "Bring them back to the bus outside. You guys will guard the surroundings of the bus. Without my order, no one is allowed to leave." After saying that, he didn't stop and turned around to return to the crack in the rock. Just like that, we were guarded by the few of them as we returned to the bus that we had come from. After we got into the car, they closed the door. 2 of them got into the car and sat down, while the other 3 stayed outside. For the next day and 2 nights, the 10 of us stayed in the car. Song Xing didn't appear, nor did the other people from the Metaphysics Union. Only the 5 people who were watching over us stayed around us and stared at us covetously. On the morning of the 3rd day, the 5 people seemed to have received an order. The person guarding outside the bus suddenly came in and whispered something to the 2 people in the bus. Then, they informed the driver and we continued our journey. According to the original plan, we were supposed to return to the Metaphysics Union's headquarters after observing the True Dragon vein. However, after such an unforeseen event, I was a little puzzled as to where they were sending us. Although the True Dragon vein had an unforeseen event, we were still under strict control on the way back. There were also people who blocked our auras and didn't allow us to get off the bus. The bus traveled for 3 days. When we were waiting outside the True Dragon vein, the 10 of us were a little anxious. However, things had calmed down during the past 3 days. Basically, everyone was stabilizing the Tao energy in their bodies and temporarily putting the previous matter aside. I was worried that something might happen, so I didn't dare to absorb the dragon energy from the jade bracelet. I was like the others, slowly stabilizing the Tao energy in my body. After 3 days, the bus finally stopped. After we were allowed to get off the bus, we went out and saw that we had returned to the Metaphysics Union's headquarters. However, after getting off the bus, the 10 of us weren't allowed to move around freely. A group of people brought us to a low room in the headquarters courtyard. After we entered, there was a grim-looking young man waiting for us. He didn't introduce himself, but the first thing he said was for us to take off all our clothes and take out all our belongings. This order made us very resistant, but the man smiled maliciously and said, "You only have 1 minute. If you exceed the time limit, you will be killed on the spot." I suddenly raised my head and looked at the tall, grim-looking young man. I couldn't see through his cultivation, but I could tell from his eyes that he wasn't joking. Su Shuxing suddenly took a step forward as though he wanted to question him. Zhang Wenfei, who was beside him, pulled him back and tried to persuade him. At that moment, someone finally started to take off their clothes due to the man's cold aura. With one person taking the lead, the remaining people's mental defenses were quickly broken. Everyone, including me, took off their clothes and placed their belongings on the ground in front of them. The young man frowned when he saw the Qilin tattoo on my chest, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he lowered his head to check my clothes and belongings. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.